Chapter 1652. Seeing Zhang Feng's gloomy face, Zhang Sun Wuji was also a little embarrassed. After all, this was indeed not the right thing to do. However, this was inevitable. Papermaking and so on could be done as they pleased. For these things, even if all the profits were to be distributed, Li Shimin would not even bat an eyelid. But this phosphate fertilizer was different. This thing was not comparable to other things. Whoever controlled the phosphate fertilizer was equivalent to controlling the lifeline of the entire Tang dynasty. Which ruler would be willing to hand over the lifeline of the entire country to others? To be controlled by others? Wasn't this a joke? Seeing that Zhang Feng's expression was a little downcast, Zhang Sun Wuji explained in a sincere and heartfelt manner. Zhang Feng finally figured it out. And he was so shocked that he broke out in a cold sweat. He also figured it out. This was an era of agriculture. Controlling the grain was equivalent to controlling everything in the country. Before, he was only thinking about the wonderful things and did not think about these twists and turns. At this time, after hearing Zhang Sun Wuji's words, Zhang Feng instantly understood. But when he thought that the huge amount of money would be in the pocket of the old emperor whom he had never met, Zhang Feng was extremely angry and raised his middle finger to the sky. Damn it! Although the crowd did not understand the meaning of Zhang Feng's middle finger, they obviously knew what Zhang Feng meant by doing this. It was nothing more than venting the unhappiness in his heart. After all, no one would feel good if this happened to him. What's more, this matter was all funded by Zhang Feng alone. Thinking of this, Li Shimin's face was a little embarrassed. After all, although he had not shown his cards now, when he showed his cards, then, what would Zhang Feng think of this? The dignified emperor of the Tang dynasty was actually like this? Ahem, Fengzi, don't think too much. His Majesty also said that when the time comes, he will give you 10% of the profits. 10%? Zhang Feng was shocked. His eyes instantly became a little excited. The 10% you're talking about, is it Chang'an, or is it the sum of all the benefits from the expansion to the extraterritorial realm? Fang Xianling looked at Zhang Feng with a playful expression. Imitating Zhang Feng, he crossed his legs and said, "He's just like what you think." Hiss. Instantly, Zhang Feng's eyes turned into the shape of a copper coin. He kept muttering, "Damn, I'm rich, I'm rich." Not to mention the outer domain, just at this time, the use of wheat and corn, which was also known as millet, in the 10 provinces of the Tang dynasty. How much area was that? All the grain from so many places was added together. Zhang Feng couldn't even calculate how much it was in an instant, let alone convert it into money. Even if it were banknotes, it wouldn't be a problem for him to pile them up from Chang'an City to Shao Mountain. The most important thing was, this was only the first step of Zhang Feng's plan. When spring came, Zhang Feng was going to improve the corn, which was millet, potatoes, and other agricultural products. Once these things were applied with phosphate fertilizer, in an instant, everything that Zhang Feng saw turned into a glittering golden light. Seeing Zhang Feng like this, Li Shimin felt a little regretful. So much money. His heart was bleeding. But what could he do since he had already said it? And it was Zhang Feng who came up with it, and this guy really liked it. Otherwise, what would he give him? Would he give him a state capital? Or give him a promotion? It was not the right time. Thinking of this, Li Shimin thought of another terrible thing. This kid was not a well-behaved person. Once he had money, if he went to buy land for him, or if he stirred up some trouble for him, then it would really cost him his life. He had to find something for him to do. Otherwise, when the time came, thinking of this, Li Shimin thought quickly. Then, an idea came to him. Fengzi, with so much money, although the emperor didn't say anything, what if the people in the court get jealous? If someone sets their eyes on you and you cause trouble, these people will definitely make a big deal out of it. When the time comes, although the emperor won't believe it, after a long time, there will be more voices like this. Naturally, the emperor will be annoyed. After hearing this, he instantly bared his teeth and said, "Damn it, if anyone dares to come, Lao Tzu will chop them up." Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin suppressed their laughter and lowered their heads, pretending to be asleep. But their shoulders were shaking so much that even Zhang Feng couldn't stand it anymore. What, you don't believe me? Just wait. When Lao Tzu's firearms are made, we'll see if I dare. And this toy can be fired from 500 meters away. Seeing Zhang Feng bragging, Li Shimin was speechless. He said, okay, you're awesome, okay? What, you don't believe me, Lao Li? At the mention of firearms, Li Shimin's heart began to worry again. Old Wei, tell me about Tuli's matter. Wei Jing couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this. He hurriedly said, Second Master, this is a top secret. This time, Zhang Feng was also interested. He waved his hand and said, top secret my ass. Even the Emperor dares to tell you, so this is considered a top secret? Isn't this top secret a bit too weak? The corner of Li Shimin's mouth twitched. He calmly waved his hand, indicating that Wei Jing could speak freely. Wei Jing saw this and said, just a few days ago, Tuli suddenly sent an army of 100,000 elites to Feng Province and Qing Province. However, these people surrounded him and didn't attack. Chapter 1653. Zhang Feng's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he heard this. First, the Qiuzi issue had not been resolved. Now, Tuli Khan had appeared and stationed himself above Chang'an. This was like besieging Wei to rescue Zhao. Zhang Feng hurriedly waved his hand and said, Old Wei, please continue. Wei Jing glanced at Li Shimin and hesitated. When he saw Li Shimin waving his hand, he said, a few days ago, Tuli sent a message saying that because of the famine, there were unscrupulous merchants among the Tang people who took the opportunity to buy most of the Turkic war horses, cattle, and sheep. As a result, there are almost no horses, cattle, and sheep to graze in the Turkic territory. This has already angered the Turkic tribes, so this time, almost all of the Turkic people are on the move. They want to get benefits from the Tang dynasty. Who knows where they got the phosphorus phosphate? So, the emperor immediately sent a diplomatic mission and a large number of spies to Feng Province and Qing Province to investigate and negotiate. They found that the 100,000 people were really all the elites of the Tuli tribe. Moreover, the diplomatic mission sent this time made no progress at all. That's why the emperor is so worried. Tuli going south. Zhang Feng finally remembered the fuse that had caused the war between the Tang dynasty and the Turkic people to last for 50 years. According to historical records, the Tang dynasty and the Turkic people would have a fierce war next year. At the beginning, Zhang Feng thought it was because of the Qiuzi issue. But now, after hearing Wei Zhang's words, Zhang Feng suddenly felt that this matter was just a preparation for this plan. They wanted to draw out all the soldiers of the Tang dynasty's Longyu Road and station the 300,000 allied troops outside Qiuzi city. Then, the 100,000 elites that Tuli suddenly appeared and headed straight for Chang'an. This was simply like the Wei River Alliance. His Majesty's thoughts and ideas had been thoroughly studied. He wanted to let Tubo have internal strife, and then Tubo would inevitably come to the Tang dynasty for help. Then Xieli would join hands with India to make a big move to pin down the troops and horses of the Tang dynasty. At first, they wanted to lure away all the troops of the Tang dynasty in the north and trap it in Jiannan Road. But because of his appearance, he devised a brilliant plan of besieging Wei to rescue Zhao, which caused a flaw to appear in the Tuju's original plan. However, this was only a careless mistake. These people actually only used a single move to push the boat along with the current to continue with this matter. It was simply, the Turks really weren't all fools. This kind of talent, Zhang Feng could not help but want to play a game of chess with him. However, this was no longer the time that the Tang dynasty could choose. Once the envoys could no longer delay and Tuli's people discovered something unusual, then it would only take one day for them to come down from Qing Province and Feng Province to reach Chang'an. However, Li Jing in Jiannan Road, Longyu Road, Hebei Road, and Yuzhou could not return in a short time. Even if there were more than 10,000 Chang'an garrison, as well as more than 10,000 imperial guards in Chang'an city and the imperial city, could they stop the 100,000 troops? This Motherf asterisk Kerr, this was really a perfect vicious plan. However, when he said this at this time, Zhang Feng felt that the emperor was obviously harboring evil intentions. First, he was tempting me with benefits, and then he was telling me such a top secret. What was the meaning of this? This was nothing more than a warning to me that the emperor was waiting for my performance. If I perform well, I'll be promoted to an official and be promoted to nobility. But if I don't perform well, will I die? Such a strange and absurd scene instantly appeared in Zhang Feng's mind. But what could he do? He was just a commoner. At this time, the emperor's intention was very clear, that was, he was waiting for his weapon and strategy. This meant that there was no way to solve this problem at this time, so he used this method to ask Zhang Feng for help. But what could Lao Tzu do? Zhang Feng wanted to curse. He felt wronged and said, "Lao Li, can I pretend that I didn't hear it just now?" Li Shimon's expression froze and said, What do you think?" In an instant, Zhang Feng withered. This matter was getting more and more out of Zhang Feng's expectations. Originally, he only wanted to do what he liked and didn't want to get involved in the tangled mess of Dao integration. However, all of this was in vain. In the end, he was still dragged into this mess. Motherf ***, the tallest tree in the forest, the tallest tree in the forest. Zhang Feng suddenly remembered this sentence, as well as what he had said to the old elementary scholar yesterday on the mountain. But there was no time for regret. If possible, Zhang Feng really didn't want to get involved, but he could only think about it now. Now that he thought about it, Zhang Feng suddenly remembered that although he had done his best to conceal the steel and weapons from the very start, the emperor had always been watching. Although the emperor had not said anything when Xiaozi was surrounded, this time was different. Not just the emperor, even Zhang Feng felt that all of this was related to Hou Junji's death. Just what were these people up to? Could it be that they wanted another Wei River alliance? Or could it be that they had also learned from Hou Junji that he was secretly developing a new weapon? Chapter 1654. Zhang Feng couldn't help but think that this was the case. Everything pointed to a single matter, a single person. That person was Hou Junji. Hou Junji was the most likely person to know of this matter. After all, he had been to White Deer College and had the best relationship with the officials. Zhang Sun Wuji was also very close to Hou Junji. Thus, when he heard of this matter, it was as easy as flipping his hand. But Zhang Feng wasn't sure if Hou Junji would do something so despicable. With this thought, Zhang Feng slowly calmed down. This matter really wasn't that complicated. After all, this matter was related to him, so it was understandable that the emperor would look for him. With this thought in mind, Zhang Feng asked, "Could it be that His Majesty wants to see me?" Qing Yao Jin, who was about to speak, almost choked to death on the smoke. "What are you thinking? His Majesty definitely can't see you right now. Moreover, you might have been targeted by the Turks at the phosphate fertilizer factory today. His Majesty called us here to protect you. For the time being, you mustn't take half a step out of White Deer College. Moreover, White Deer College's defenses have been set up to the maximum, so you can be at ease." Hearing this, Zhang Feng breathed a sigh of relief. He slowly took a puff of his cigarette and said, "If you really leave this matter to me, then it'll be easy." Li Shimon's eyes lit up as he hurriedly asked, "Have you thought of some brilliant plan?" Zhang Feng indifferently nodded. "Who am I?" "That Zhuge." "Enough, you can just fool others. Don't talk about it here." Without waiting for him to finish, Li Shimon decisively interrupted him and continued, "This matter, just tell me, how should we do it?" Zhang Feng waved his hand, indicating for everyone to follow him. A few moments later, Zhang Feng led Li Shimon and the others to the study. He then unfurled the map and used charcoal to mark out the locations of Chang and Feng Province and Xing Province. He also drew a few circles around Xiaozi, Yuzhou, and Jiannan Province. Everyone was baffled by what they saw. After marking out these places, Zhang Feng stood next to Li Shimon and rubbed his chin as he sat cross-legged on the ground. Li Shimon was taken aback, but he copied Zhang Feng and also sat cross-legged on the ground. How could Wei Zheng and the others dare to stand? They also hastily sat on the ground and stared at the map. However, they had looked at this map countless times, but they had not found any clues. Now that they saw Zhang Feng acting like this, they could not help but feel a little strange. Could it be that this brat could really see some clues? They sat there for half an hour. Just when Li Shimon's legs were numb and he wanted to stand up, Zhang Feng slapped his thigh and said, "I got it." Li Shimon was startled, but at the same time, he was relieved of the pain. He hurriedly asked Wei Zheng and the others to help him up. Then he asked, "What did you think of?" "My legs are numb." After Zhang Feng recovered with great difficulty and saw everyone's angry faces, he hurriedly said, "Don't be angry. This Tuli is just waiting for us to make a move. Then, he will follow our movements and make a corresponding arrangement." Li Shimon's expression changed. They had already seen through this point. Now that Zhang Feng said this, he hurriedly asked, "Then, do you have a way to break out of this situation?" "Of course. What Tuli used this time is just the method we used to besiege Wei to rescue Zhao. At this time, since they are waiting, it means that they are waiting for our next move. So, why don't we use a method that we have never used before?" "Say it," Wei Zheng said with a dark face. Seeing this, Zhang Feng didn't dare to show off. He hurriedly said, "Well, what I mean is, since he has appeared here, we have a plan. Delay. As long as we can delay them for half a month, we don't need to send troops. He will naturally retreat." Hearing this, Li Shimon and the others couldn't help but be dumbfounded. What kind of operation was this? Would they just wait there obediently? Seeing this, Zhang Feng knew that Lao Li and the others didn't believe him. He said, "Actually, I can't believe it myself, let alone you. But, if you trust me, then we will have fun this time. Do you feel that the weather has been a little cold recently?" Zhang Feng pointed at the map and then said, calculating the time, "It should be early winter now. Usually, the cold wind in the morning and the white frost in the early morning should have already arrived, right? But this year, it is a little late." Seeing that Zhang Feng was pretending to be a charlatan again, Li Shimon was a little speechless. He asked with some doubt, "What do you mean?" Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously and said, "It's very simple. That is to wait. You have seen that the weather has been exceptionally clear these days. That is to say, the weather in the north is definitely unusually cold. If you don't believe me, you can send someone to ask." Li Shimon was shocked and hurriedly asked, "Fengzi, what do you mean? What does this have to do with the weather?" "It is because of the snow that our time is more critical." Chapter 1655. At this time, Li Shimon was also shocked by Yuan Tiangong's move. Hearing Yuan Tiangong's words, Li Shimon fixed his eyes on it, only to see, there was actually a thin layer of frost on top of the fragrance. At this moment, Li Shimon couldn't help exclaiming and asked, "Master Yuan, how did you do it?" Li Shimon naturally had never encountered such a miraculous thing. No. Wasn't this method the same as the one Fengzi made in the phosphate fertilizer factory? And it was so similar. However, the only difference was that these were fragrant incense sticks, and they had been lit up. Yet, they were still frozen by the frost and snow. This seemed to, at this time, seeing Yuan Tiangang was fiddling with something but ignoring him, Li Shimon was not in a hurry. Yuan Tiangang seemed to be extremely dignified at this time. At this time, Li Shimon also looked a little nervous. For a full hour, Yuan Tiangang and Li Chunfeng were fiddling with something on the ground. First, they inserted a chopstick into a bowl full of water, and then the water could flow up along the chopstick. How could such an exaggerated scene not shock everyone? After fiddling with it for several times, Yuan Tiangang also used divination, astrology, and so on. Then he suddenly said, "Your Majesty, this time, I have indeed divined the two provinces of Xing Province and Feng Province, as well as the north. The Turkic territory must have been covered by snow at this time. Therefore, I think what President Zhang said is probably true." "Really?" Li Shimon was a little hesitant. After pondering for a long time, Li Shimon waved his sleeves and said, "Come here." Xiao Gizi, who had been waiting outside the imperial study, hurriedly pushed the door of the imperial study open. Your Majesty. Is there any news from the Ministry of Rights mission to Xing Province and Feng Province? Your Majesty, there is no news for the time being. You find the person who sent this news to Chang'an. Yes, Your Majesty. After a while, Xiao Gizi led a person in the Ministry of Rights official robe to the door of the imperial study while teaching etiquette. As soon as he entered the door, Xiao Gizi hastily said, Your Majesty, the official from the Ministry of Rights who came back to Chang'an to deliver the message has arrived. When Li Shimin heard this, he put down the memorial in his hand. With a wave of his hand, he dismissed everyone. Li Shimin walked down from the dragon throne and came to the side of the minor official from the Ministry of Rights who was kneeling on the ground and trembling with his head pressed against the ground. Let me ask you, did you come back from Feng Province or Xing Province? When did you come back? When that person heard this, he hurriedly replied, replying to Your Majesty, this lowly one returned to the Ministry of Rights in the afternoon today. That minor official from the Ministry of Rights even clearly explained how long he had been delayed on the road, who he had met on the road, and what he had eaten. Li Shimin frowned slightly. He interrupted that person and asked, let me ask you, when I left, what was the weather like in Xing Province and Feng Province? The petty official couldn't help but be stunned. The emperor actually asked such a question? But he didn't dare to think too much. He hurriedly replied, Your Majesty, I left Feng Province early yesterday morning, but this lowly one didn't pay much attention to it. I just felt that it was much colder than usual. How cold was it? Li Shimin instantly grasped the key of the question and asked. This answer almost confirmed Li Shimin's thoughts. After all, at this time, there were already the memorials from Longyu Province and Yuzhou Province in the last 2 days on his desk. In these 2 days, almost all of them were reporting about the strange weather, as well as hoping that the imperial court would transfer military supplies. Even in some places, because of the arrival of winter, many soldiers were still wearing summer clothes. There were already soldiers who were frozen to death due to the cold. It was just the beginning of winter. That was it. Then, at this time, when the petty official spoke again, Li Shimin couldn't help but come to his senses. The petty official said, Your Majesty, this lowly one only knows that the wind and rain at the end of the year in Feng Province and Xing Province have lasted for countless days. And I don't know why it suddenly became cold these 2 days. The cold was like rolling in the snow without wearing clothes. When I came back, some people in the delegation had already caught a cold because of the cold. Hearing this, Li Shimin instantly understood. Before the gathering, Yuan Tiangang had told him the result of divination, but Li Shimin still felt it was incredible. If it was true, then the matter of Tuli's visit this time could be discussed. Master Yuan, what do you think of this matter? Li Shimin dismissed the petty official and then turned to ask Yuan Tiangang, who was sitting on one side. Yuan Tiangang first silently looked at the Bagua mirror on the desk in front of him, then nodded and said, according to the observation of the imperial astronomer these days and the calculation of venting anger in the past, it has been a few days since the beginning of winter. So at this time, it's reasonable that something happened in the Turkic territory. Otherwise, Tuli wouldn't be so arrogant. Although this lowly one doesn't know anything about military deployment, I know that once he really starts a war, he won't be stationed in Xing Province and Feng Province. Chapter 1656. After all, Yuan Tiangang really didn't understand military science. He just guessed the things in Feng Province and Xing Province in the way he was good at. In the end, Li Shimin's head was about to explode because of Yuan Tiangang's astrological divination. He hurriedly sent Yuan Tiangang away. Only then did he find that the light had already been lit in the imperial study. At this moment, Zhang Sun Wugo, who was dressed in dark green robes, slowly walked in with a plate of food. When Xiao Gizi saw this, he hurriedly dismissed all the palace maids and closed the door on his way out. In an instant, only the Emperor and Empress Zhangsun were left in the imperial study. Second brother, have some porridge first. You haven't had a good meal all day. Seeing this, Li Shimin sighed. At this moment, Empress Zhangsun had already handed the porridge to Li Shimin's mouth. Li Shimin looked at the porridge and instantly smiled bitterly. Is it still that guy's porridge? Yes. While speaking, Empress Jiangsun had already come behind Li Shimin. She pressed Li Shimin's temples and began to gently massage him. With such a massage, Li Shimin instantly moaned comfortably. Maid Guanyin, do you think Tuli's trip to the south is really as easy as Fengzi, Master Yuan, and the other said? While speaking, Li Shimin's jade spoon stirred in the glazed bowl with tinkling sounds. He instantly thought of the transparent bowl Zhang Feng used in the phosphate fertilizer factory today and instantly lost his appetite. He simply leaned on the dragon throne and let Empress Jiangsun massage his temples. At this moment, Li Shimin calmed down. In an instant, everything that had happened before surged into his mind. People needed to be quiet. After calming down, they would find the difference when looking at the same thing again. Especially at this time. Li Shimin had been worrying about such trivial things all day long. But at this time, his mind was still in a mess. Using Zhang Feng's poem, Unending and Messy, to describe it was the most accurate. But at this moment, as he calmed down and quietly enjoyed himself, as he recalled this matter, he suddenly had a different feeling. That is, the main point of this matter was when Tuli would go south. What was the purpose of going south? At this moment, as long as these two problems were confirmed, this matter would be easily solved. After all, the matter of the Turkic Great Snow was almost certain. If Tuli really wanted to go south, why would he station himself in these two places? Moreover, it was widely publicized. This did not conform to the logic of development. In particular, to the east was Yuzhou and Li Jing's 100,000 elites, and to the south was Cheng and City. Although there weren't many garrisons in Xing Prefecture, Feng Prefecture, and the other prefectures along the way, it was more than enough to stop them for 3 to 5 days. This little bit of time was enough for them to go back and help. However, at this time, Li Shimin followed Zhang Feng's way of thinking and made another important discovery. That is, Tuli's purpose this time was not simple. It could be said that he was fighting for Qiuzi, or it could be said that he was simply asking for something. Only by figuring out these two things could he know Tuli's real purpose this time. At this time, Li Shimin's mind was being massaged by Empress Jiangsun, and he understood more and more things. When Empress Jiangsun's hands began to tremble, Li Shimin held her and said gently, Maid Guanyin, come, I'll give you a massage. Empress Jiangsun heard this, covered her mouth and smiled, and said, Your Majesty, forget it. Seeing that Your Majesty has recovered, I feel very gratified. Hearing this, Li Shimin's eyes were slightly moist. Maid Guanyin, he took the opportunity to hold Jiangsun in his arms. But at this moment, 2 very small voices sounded outside the imperial study. However, Li Shimin and Qin Haodong had already heard it. As if they had been electrocuted, they quickly separated. Li Shimin coughed and asked somewhat angrily, Why are you quarreling outside? Outside the door, Zhangsun Wuji's voice suddenly sounded, Your Majesty, I have something to report. Empress Jiangsun blushed when she heard this. She glared at Li Shimin with some anger and then said, Then I'll leave first. After Empress Jiangsun left, Zhangsun Wuji, Yuqi Gong, Qing Yao Jin, and Qin Xiong entered the imperial study one after another. Li Shimin sat on the dragon chair as usual and said, What's the matter? Your Majesty, just now there was news from Longyu. Liangzhou, Shazhou, Shizhou, and Qiuzi City had continuous heavy rain today. The weather suddenly dropped, and countless soldiers were frostbitten. The situation in Qiuzi City is quite serious now. Hearing this, Li Shimin's heart skipped a beat, and he asked in a trembling voice, What did you say? When did this happen? Yuqi Gong took out a report from his arms with a dignified expression and handed it to Li Shimin. Your Majesty, this is the military report that was just sent back from Qiuzi. Your Majesty, please take a look. Chapter 1657. When Li Shimin heard this, his face instantly changed. Yuqi Gong did not hesitate and presented the memorial to the emperor. The content of the memorial was actually very simple. It was a lack of military supplies. In other words, winter clothes. Seeing this, Li Shimin's face gradually turned cold. The memorial was sent from Liangzhou, Ganzhou, Shazhou, and other places 5 days ago. These places were located at the foot of Mount Qilian. Due to the low temperature a few days ago, the snow on Mount Qilian that never melted all year round had caused an avalanche. The temperature instantly dropped. In addition, due to the low temperature in the past 2 days, traces of snow had already appeared in these places. The garrison in Longyu Road accounted for more than half of the total military strength of the Tang dynasty. At this time, these soldiers were still using the military equipment of previous years, or the military uniforms and armors of summer and autumn. Compared to the unpredictable weather in Longyu Road, Li Shimin instantly frowned. This matter was too serious. However, right at this time, Yuchi Gong once again said, "Your Majesty, the accompanying messenger said that this time, Longyu's matter is far more serious than this memorial. The reserves of the various provinces and prefectures are practically all in a state of emergency. If the court still doesn't respond, who knows, in another half a month, it might. Is there any news from Qiuzi?" Li Shimin was most concerned about Qiuzi. In the end, this matter could be solved. If something happened to Qiuzi, then, the problem would be really big. At this moment, Li Shimin suddenly thought of a terrifying matter and hurriedly asked, "Have you seen the Crown Prince?" At this question, their expressions changed instantly. "Your Majesty, didn't we agree that the Crown Prince would go to Qiuzi City from the Chang and barracks with Niu Jijie tomorrow?" Qing Yaojin and the others did not know why the emperor asked this at this time, but they still reminded him. Now that he said this, Li Shimin just remembered, but at this moment, he suddenly had a thought that he did not want the Crown Prince to go to the front line. And he also believed that these people seemed to have come in the middle of the night for this matter. Li Shimin took a deep breath and said, "Speak. Did you come here so late at night because of the Crown Prince?" In the beginning, he hadn't thought about it. However, when he thought about it, of all times, this memorial had to come at this time. Furthermore, it was delivered right here. Moreover, these people had come together. It would be strange if there was no problem. Seeing this, Qing Yaojin and the others said, "Your Majesty, this is a serious matter. I think it's better to wait until after tomorrow's morning court. What do you think? After all, the Crown Prince's personal expedition is a major event." At this time, such a big thing happened in Qiuzi and Longyu Road. If we go to Qiuzi at this time, it will definitely make the court uneasy. Your Majesty, please reconsider. Although this matter doesn't seem to be a big problem for the time being, it will be a big problem once there is a problem, Your Majesty. This official requests the Emperor to take back the order. The matter of the Crown Prince guarding the border needs to be discussed separately. Qing Yaojin and the people from the military department were anxious. They all knelt down. After all, they had all been Li Shimin's generals, and the Crown Prince was related to the continuation of the Tang dynasty. This could not be a trifling matter. In the past, going to the border with Niu Jinda and the refined equipment would not be a big problem. But now, the sudden change in weather, the heavy snow stuck between Kucha and Chang'an, and the sudden drop in temperature could instantly affect the morale of the army. In the past, it would have been fine, but in this weather, the soldiers were hungry and cold, and their morale was slack. Moreover, they were facing an army of more than 300,000 Turkic and Indian soldiers, perhaps even more. At this time, they would definitely take advantage of this and send out their troops. At that time, once the morale of the soldiers was shaken, it would cause irreparable losses. At this time, even if the Crown Prince went, it would not be of much use. On the contrary, it would be a signal for both sides to send out their troops. At this time, everyone began to worry. Li Shimin was also somewhat vexed. Enough. Do you think I'm willing? I'm sure you all know what happened in Chang'an City last time. Without the Crown Prince's intelligence, how could the rebellion be judged overnight? This is really what I and the Tang dynasty need. If he can solve the siege of Chang'an, why can't he solve the siege of Qiuzi? Don't you believe in the Crown Prince? Or don't you believe in Zhang Feng and the military science developed by Zhang Feng? At this time, in an instant, everyone's doubts came to an abrupt end. That was right. They could not believe in Li Qingqian. After all, they watched Li Qingxian grow up. He was timid, overthinking, and always indecisive. But after Li Shimin told them what happened in Chang, and last time, they suddenly realized that the crown prince was no longer the crown prince of the past. And today, everything in the phosphate fertilizer factory was almost handled by the crown prince alone. And these things seemed to have never been seen before, although today, when facing Cui Yingying, he was a little lost and everyone was worried that the crown prince would do something bad. But to their surprise, they were after the dispute between Cui Yingying and Zhang Feng, the crown prince could distinguish the pros and cons in a short time. When had they seen this before? What did this mean? This meant that the crown prince had really grown up. Chapter 1658. How could Li Shimin not hope that Li Qingxian wouldn't go? But he also knew that if Li Qingxian didn't experience a storm, he would never be able to take on such a great responsibility. And Xiaozi City was a necessary condition for Li Qingxian's growth. Although the court's attitude toward him had somewhat changed because of Hou Junji's night raid, this was still not enough. At the very least, what Li Qingxian had done so far was far from enough. After all, he was the crown prince of the Tang dynasty, the hope of the Tang dynasty. Last time, not even Li Shimin dared to believe that these schemes had come from Li Qingxian's mouth. In his view, this was nothing more than Zhang Feng exerting a great deal of effort behind the scenes, and he had only come to convey the message. Li Shimin had also asked Zhang Feng about Li Qingxian's trip to Qiuzi, and Zhang Feng hadn't been too worried. Today, when Li Shimin said that the temperature had plummeted, he hadn't even said that Li Qingxian couldn't go. This meant that Li Qingxian's trip would probably go without any mishaps. After all, Zhang Feng had said that he would bring the best equipment with him. Moreover, he would have Gao Ji and Niu Jinda with him. In this way, there would be no problem with his safety. Li Shimin wanted to see if Li Qingxian could command a campaign without Zhang Feng. Li Shimin was very ambitious for this battle. Not only did he want to wipe away his previous humiliation and strike fear into the Turks, he also wanted to use this battle to slaughter his way into the Turks. This was only one of his goals. The other was to test this batch of military equipment and see when it could be used as a killing machine on the battlefield. Most importantly, intimidate. It had been a very long time since the Tang dynasty had won a major battle. Countless people were waiting to see how he would deal with this situation in Qiuzi. The slightest mistake would be a fuse. Not only would the Tubo and the other members of the Tang dynasty have their own ideas, Gao Juli and the Wei clan would also be shaken. Thus, for this battle, Li Shimin was very greedy. Not only did he want to win beautifully, he also wanted to show off the might of the Tang dynasty. And the Crown Prince's personal expedition was a very good gimmick. At this time, Li Shimin also weighed the pros and cons for a long time before he waved his hand and said, "This matter has been decided. If there's nothing else, you may all leave. We will take our leave." Originally, they still had something to say, but after seeing Li Shimin's current state, they could only swallow their thoughts. After all, this matter was almost a foregone conclusion. There was no point in saying anything more. He could only wait until the morning assembly tomorrow to see if there was a way to cover up this matter. After all, in terms of eloquence, all the generals in the imperial court added together would not be a match for the civil officials. After everyone left, Xiao Gizi entered the imperial study and said, "Your Majesty, His Highness the Crown Prince requests an audience." Li Shimin was stunned and asked, "How long has he been here?" "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince has been here for some time." Li Shimin smiled faintly. He knows how to judge the situation. "Let him in." However, Xiao Gizi hesitated and said, "Your Majesty, His Highness the Crown Prince is fully equipped and is waiting on the side at this time." The Crown Prince asked this servant to ask Your Majesty if he could bring a weapon to the audience. Li Shimin was happy to hear this. He waved his hand and motioned for Xiao Gizi to let Li Qingxian in. In fact, Li Qingxian had been here for a long time. After dealing with the aftermath of today's phosphate fertilizer factory, it was the overwhelming business and other matters. When these matters were finished, it was already around 5 o'clock. After completing the handover of related matters with the three departments, Li Qingxian originally wanted to enter the palace first to meet the emperor. However, he met old He, who told him to quickly go to Zhang Feng's residence. When he arrived at the residence, he found that Gao Can had been there for a long time and was now waving a 9-foot-long halberd. Moreover, he was waving it vigorously. How could Li Qingxian not be excited? Because he had seen all the weapons produced by the Tang dynasty, but he had never seen such a magical thing. Moreover, the shaft of this halberd was emitting a silver light, which meant that the body of this halberd was made of steel. How could he not be excited and envious? As soon as he arrived, Gao Can hurriedly brought him to see Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng didn't say anything. He just showed him a map and a sand table and asked him to control the defense of the city with 100,000 people. Then, he inexplicably threw a big box to him. The box was very heavy. At the very least, it took him a lot of effort to bring the box to the courtyard. When he opened the box, he was instantly blinded by the neat set of equipment. The armor was in the style of the Mingguang armor, except that it was mixed with a more compact armor-making technology. The scales on it were like fish scales, divided into 3 layers. The first layer was as thin as a fingernail, and it was connected by wires. The second layer was as big as a copper coin, and the most important layer was the third layer, which was the size of a palm. And this was only a breastplate. When he took out the breastplate, in addition to 2 wrist guards, there was a silver arm guard that connected the breastplate and wrist guards with layers of fine wires. However, on the arm guard, there were 2 things similar to the tiger subduing tiger. The Qixia armor was a leg guard and a plate armor. And a pair of boots. The boots were almost. They were all covered with a thick layer of steel. This was also the heaviest thing besides the breastplate. Other than that, the leg guards, wrist guards, and so on only weighed a few kilograms. However, this also caused Li Qingxian to be greatly shocked. Could this thing be worn? He didn't know why this armor was made like this. And under this set of armor, there was something that made Li Qingxian's eyes light up. It was a cloak that he was wearing at this time. At this time, Li Qingxian carried a longbow on his back and a spear in his hand. On his right belt hung a crossbow and a quiver of arrows. On his left waist hung a modeo that shone with silver light. Along the way, he walked into the imperial study. As soon as he entered, Li Shimon's eyes widened. Chapter 1659. Your son pays his respects to father. As Li Qingxian spoke, he straightened his body and gave Li Shimon a standard military salute. Li Shimon's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Seeing Li Qingxian's reaction, he hurriedly called for more candles to be lit in the imperial study. Only then did he see the armor he was wearing clearly. Speaking of armor, Li Shimon thought of the strangely dressed statue of Zhang Feng's mentor at the entrance of the academy. At this moment, Li Qingxian was wearing exactly the same as that. Qian, what are you wearing? At this time, Li Qingxian was wearing a loose shirt with countless large pockets. Among them, several crossbow bolts could be faintly seen. Especially in the pockets on his arms, it was unknown what was inside, but they looked incomparably flat. The shirt was as green as a thicket. There was also something without sleeves on the outside of the shirt. It was made of a kind of leather. There was nothing else on it, but it looked like 2 pieces of turtle shell. No matter how he looked at it, it felt awkward. Moreover, he didn't see that kid take it out when he was on the mountain last time. Could it be that this thing was the bulletproof vest? Qian, this is the bulletproof vest? Hearing this, Li Qingxian hurriedly took off the bulletproof vest. However, taking off the bulletproof vest was also a laborious task. It took him a whole cup of tea's worth of labor to take off the bulletproof vest. When he threw it on the ground, it made a clanking sound of jingshu. Seeing this, Li Shimon became even more curious. He picked it up from the ground. In an instant, the weight shocked Li Shimon. This thing already weighed more than 5 kilograms. After touching it carefully, he realized that the things that looked like plate armor were actually pieces of steel. The back of the bulletproof vest was sewn with an inch-thick piece of iron. Before Li Shimon could finish, Li Qingxian said, "Father, this is the bulletproof vest. It's made of 3 steel plates and 5 small steel plates on the side. It's also made of steel wire. It took Feng Zi, Mokido, and the craftsmen on the mountain 3 days to sew it. And so far, only 3 have been made. More than 70 people have been mobilized, and in 3 days and 3 nights. Hearing this, Li Shimin finally understood. However, he was still shocked by Li Qingxian's description. 3 days. And that's what they came up with? Damn it. It was simply insane. 3 pieces of equipment had already mobilized so many people. What would happen if an entire army of 100,000 people was equipped with this thing? How could that be? At this time, Li Shimin was still quite shaken. With Li Qingxian's help, he put on the bulletproof vest. Although it took some effort to put it on, it didn't affect his movements at all. He didn't feel any discomfort even when he swung Li Qingxian's spear. It was as if he wasn't wearing it at all. At this time, looking at the armor on Li Qingxian's body, Li Shimin's eyes burned as if they were on fire. Seeing this, Li Qingxian introduced them to Li Shimin one by one. Father, look. Feng Zi said that this is a combat uniform. There are 20 eyebrows and 2-foot-long Lujiang arrowheads on each arm. When he's not using them, he uses them as arm guards. The one on the wrist is called a special combat glove. It's made of steel wire and leather. The rubber on the back of the hand is actually a steel plate. These bags are filled with steel plates. This is called a combat trouser. The pockets of the trouser have the same effect. The difference is that there are 2 3-pronged military spikes on each of the calves. The boots are the most complicated. According to Feng Zi, the weight of these boots is even heavier than the bulletproof vest. The main reason is the weight. If you wear this, the chassis will be very stable. There's also knowledge on the boots. There's an ejecting dagger that can be controlled by the big toe. More importantly, these boots are a set with the armor I brought. Li Qingxian was wearing a kind of equipment that Zhang Feng created based on the special forces equipment in his memory and the current situation. Zhang Feng created this kind of equipment according to the needs of both offense and defense. After all, this was the era of cold weapons. While reducing the number of steel plates, it increased the number of weapons equipped. This was not only suitable for individual combat, but also for group combat. In this battle, Zhang Feng not only wanted to make a name for himself with these pieces of equipment, but he also wanted them to shock everyone in this battle. Therefore, in the future design, this set of equipment was the most eye-catching. However, this was only the beginning. The equipment that Zhang Feng designed could only be used by special forces, special combat personnel, and generals. The equipment used by real soldiers was actually what Li Qingxian was wearing right now. This kind of equipment could block most of the damage even if it was a frontal assault. This was especially true for the vital parts. It could provide the best protection without affecting the battle. The most useless part of this set of equipment was the helmet. In Li Shimin's opinion, this green thing that looked like a pot lid and a turtle shell was really a little. However, when Li Shimin used the spear in his hand to knock on Li Qingxian's helmet, he immediately shut up. The crisp sound of metal colliding made him realize that this thing was definitely not simple. You said there was another set of armor? Where is it? Hurry up and take it out. Let me take a look. Chapter 1660. Father, do you really want to see it? Li Qingxian was a little hesitant. The reason he chose this set of equipment was because it was light and agile. The other reason was because Li Qingxian felt that it was the most eye-catching. The set of equipment in the box was really too heavy. It was so heavy that even a strong man like Gao can despise it, let alone him. However, would Li Shimin allow him to not wear it at this time? He even ran to Lao Tzu to show off. How could he let this brat slip away so easily? Li Qingxian seemed to have noticed that Li Shimin was a little unhappy today. Originally, Zhang Feng had always warned him that he could only wear this thing after leaving the Guanyi Pass and not be seen by others. However, it was late at night, and Li Qingxian was also in the Eastern Palace. He heard that someone from the military wanted to dissuade him from going to Chiuzi. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, he put on this thing and came to the imperial study to give Li Shimin some reassurance. In his opinion, with these layers of protection, there was no need to worry about safety. As for the cold and whatnot, these were indeed problems. However, in his opinion, these problems should not affect this expedition. At the very least, they would not affect his trip to the border. However, he was still worried, so he came to take a look. Fortunately, in the end, his father did not exempt him from going to Chiotzi. At this time, under little Gizi's instructions, four imperial guards carried a large wooden box into the imperial study. After seeing Li Shimon's armor, little Gizi was shocked. However, he still ordered everyone to leave for fear of harming the innocent. Who was little Gizi? He was Li Shimon's personal eunuch. How could he not know the preciousness of this thing? After they left, only then did Li Qingxian take out the set of armor and weapons, placing them one by one on the ground. Li Shimon had worn armor before, but when he saw this thing that looked like Mingguang armor, he was a little confused. Wearing armor was very complicated, but this thing seemed a little simple no matter how he looked at it. After seeing the armor, Li Shimon's interest was piqued. He said, "Qian, come, help me put it on." "Imperial father, you can't do that." Li Qingxian turned pale with fright. He knew about this armor. It would take him a lot of effort to wear it, let alone his father. However, Li Shimon had already steeled his heart. He waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about this anymore. First, help Zhen put on some armor. It has been a long time since Zhen has worn armor." When Li Qingxian heard this, he wanted to say something, but it was already too late. He could only agree. He didn't know why his father wanted to wear this. After all, the weight of this armor was not light at all. However, he had no choice but to help his imperial father put it on. A moment later, the armor was put on, and even the boots on Li Qingxian's feet were put on by him. The main material of the boots was cowhide and pigskin, while the soles were made of rubber mixed with a layer of steel. This kind of steel plate covered everything from the soles to the insteps. Even the ankles were covered with a thick layer of steel plate. Just this pair of boots alone weighed 3 caddies. A pair of boots that weighed 3 pounds, bang, bang, bang. With Li Shimon's help, he stood up with some difficulty. He even had to support himself with the steel spear. This made Li Shimon sigh with emotion. Looks like Zhen is still old. This set of armor that weighs several tens of jin is already weighing me down to the point that I can't breathe. When Li Qingxian heard this, he hurriedly said, "Imperial father, what are you saying?" This set of armor was originally extremely heavy, and it was difficult for Sun to wear it. However, this set of armor doesn't affect my movements in battle at all. Moreover, its defensive ability is incomparable. Although Sun has never tried it, Sun dares to guarantee that ordinary crossbows won't be able to pierce through it at all. Therefore, Sun feels that there is no need to doubt Sun's safety this time. Sun can definitely. Li Shimon waved his hand and interrupted Li Qingxian. Zhen is not worried about safety. These things are all made of that kind of steel. Zhen is assured. However, have you thought of one thing? Feng Zi once said that psychology is now part of Long Yu Dao. It is already a world of ice and snow. You also know the situation of our Tang dynasty. We don't have enough military equipment. What Zhen is worried about is the morale of the army. This was what Li Shimon was most worried about. As for safety, he firmly believed that with Niu Jinda personally protecting him, nothing would go wrong. However, once Long Yu lost the morale of the army, then how could they win this battle? Even if they had a batch of military equipment now, so what? Oh right, is the cannon on Feng Zi's side ready? Li Shimon shook his head and stopped himself from thinking about it. Instead, he asked Li Qingxian. When Li Qingxian heard this, he said excitedly, "Imperial father, Sun actually arrived a long time ago. However, the matter of the cannon is really too big, and it is incomparably cumbersome to carry. Even if there is a metal carriage, it is really too ostentatious. Therefore, Sun only got one and left it with the retired emperor in Taiji Palace. Hope Imperial father can, however, at this moment." Suddenly, a thunderous sound came from the depths of the palace, instantly causing Li Shimin and Li Qingxian's expressions to change abruptly. Boom! Chapter 1661. There was a loud bang. Inside and outside the palace, and even in Cheng and city, people heard it. Zhang Feng, who had finished his work and was about to go to bed, was suddenly awakened. He hurriedly got out of bed and pushed the door open. But he didn't see anything. But the loud bang just now was so real. In the mansion, Zhang Feng thought he was having hysteria. But when he saw all the guards and servants were awakened, he was shocked. Zhang Feng hurriedly asked, "Old Du, what's going on? You heard it too?" Hearing this, Du Ziding hurriedly said, "Master, this is the sound coming from the depths of the palace. It seems that God is angry. At this time, there is such a muffled thunder. Master, you should go back and rest quickly. I'm afraid there will be an accident." They had heard of the thunder of drought. But it was winter now. How could there be such a thing? At this time, almost everyone in Zhang Feng's mansion and Cheng and city were awakened. During this time, the imperial city was not peaceful. First, there was such a thing, and then there was such a loud thunder tonight. The key was that it came from the palace. How could it not make people panic? It was already very late at night. At this time, almost all the officers who were patrolling the streets had gone to take a nap. At this time, this sudden occurrence made everyone completely numb. All the officers who were patrolling the streets walked around Cheng and city in a daze. It couldn't be helped. Although this matter happened deep in the palace, if they didn't take action, damn it, not only would they lose their rice bowls, they might even lose their livelihood. In the dark, there were more people who were awakened by the explosion in the middle of the night. But at this time, no one dared to go out to see what was going on. After all, the previous incident in Cheng and city was still fresh in people's minds. At this moment, Zhang Feng, the instigator of all of this, suddenly came to a realization. Damn it! Isn't it the sound made by the cannon I built? Who is this? How can this thing be in the palace so quickly? And damn it, they were still in Taiji Palace. Motherf asterisk Ker, isn't he trying to take my life? Old Du! Old Du! Zhang Fengzai could no longer sit still and hurriedly shouted. Hearing this, Du Ziding hurried over. Master! Go, prepare a palanquin for me immediately. Du Ziding was shocked. She couldn't help but look at the sky that was as dark as the bottom of a pot. She asked, Master, it's so late. Where are you going? Zhang Feng was even more anxious now. Once this matter became serious, no matter who was playing with this thing in the palace, once something happened, it would definitely be a huge matter. At that time, the matter of the cannon would definitely not be able to be hidden. Even if the emperor didn't get involved, what would the civil and military officials of the court, as well as the eccentric retired emperor, do? Just thinking about it made him feel extremely excited. In fact, Zhang Feng was not afraid of Li Shimin. Although he had never seen him, the emperor would definitely know that he had made so many contributions to the Tang dynasty. Moreover, this thing was made by the emperor at his behest. If something happened at this time, it was obviously the emperor's own fault. Damn it, you could have gone to the palace to take the exam. Why did you have to do it in the palace? Wasn't it obvious that you were looking for excitement? And it was in the middle of the night. Did you want to blow up the palace? Zhang Feng had mixed a lot of iron beads and iron scraps into the gunpowder to increase its damage. The entire cannon was also made of a layer of colored glass and a thin layer of pig iron. The lethality of the cannon was invisibly increased countless times. Zhang Feng didn't even need to think to know the result of this shot. If he didn't run now, when would he run? Although Zhang Feng didn't know the Holy Yuan very well, and there weren't many descriptions of him in history, as long as people had brains, they wouldn't think that he was an easy person to get along with, a person who could create the Tang dynasty. How could he be simple? Although the description of him in history was very simple, it told Zhang Feng that this person must be an extremely terrifying existence. What's more, since Li Yuan abdicated, he could make dozens of imperial sisters for Li Shimin in a year. How could such an efficient person be a simple person? What's more, the harem was the place where Li Shimon's concubines lived, and it was the territory of the Emperor Zhongsun. Most of the descriptions of the Emperor Zhongsun in history were also praises. Many of Li Shimon's decisions were almost all discussed with the Empress Zhongsun. Such a person encountered such a big thing tonight. If the source was traced, the emperor could spare him, but the retired emperor and the empress could play him to death. How could Zhang Feng dare to act rashly? If he ran up the mountain at this time, it would be safest with the protection of the 4 great scholars. At that time, he could deny it even if he was beaten to death. Thinking of this, Zhang Feng said eagerly, "Old Du, quickly prepare a sedan chair or a carriage for me. I have something important to do and must return to the academy before dawn." This time, Du Zidong was even more confused. He said with a speechless face, "Master, now it's estimated that you can't go out of the city gate before noon tomorrow." Zhang Feng was dumbfounded. He asked, "Why? Why can't I go out without any reason? The fire of Cheng and city last time hasn't been settled, so the higher-ups made the rule. Except for the approval of the imperial court, under normal circumstances, you can only go out before noon but not in." Hearing this, Zhang Feng's eyes went black instantly, and he said sadly, F***CKU. Chapter 1662. Deep inside the palace. Actually, it refers to the harem. The harem is located in the west inner court behind the Yeting Palace. This west inner court is the imperial garden. After that, it is the forbidden garden where the emperor, the empress, and the imperial concubines live. This is the most important place in the imperial palace. It includes the emperor, as well as some top-secret files in the imperial court, as well as the ancestral hall and other places. Generally speaking, the emperor and the empress's palace are in the deepest part of this forbidden garden. However, Li Shimon set up his palace at the intersection of this west inner court and the forbidden garden in order to facilitate the handling of government affairs. And the empress naturally has to move over. The advantage of doing this is that all officials have no excuse to enter the harem, which ensures the safety of the harem. And at this time, in the deepest part of the forbidden garden, which is where Li Shimon's palace used to be. This was the place where Li Yuan currently resided. This place occupied a large area of the entire forbidden garden and was separated by a deep palace. The difference has been made. And at this time, Li Yuan's palace is overcrowded, and from time to time, there are bursts of thick smoke and flames faintly flickering. And Li Yuan is surrounded by a group of palace maids and beautiful imperial concubines at this time, shrinking to the side and shivering. And each of them is covered in dust at this time. There are even a large number of people who are not wearing clothes to cover their bodies, not to mention hair buns and so on. Li Yuan's white beard is also gone. More than half of his face was gone. At this moment, the left side of his face was completely black, as if someone had splashed ink on it. Empress Zhongsun came early. After confirming that Li Yuan is fine, she took a look and almost fainted. Only to see that where Li Yuan's palace used to be, where is the magnificent palace of the past? At this time, what is left in place is only a piece of dilapidated walls. Empress Zhongsun commanded the Jianghu guards, the imperial guards, and the palace maids and eunuchs to put out the fire, and asked anxiously, "Imperial father, did you encounter an assassin?" Li Yuan is still in a state of confusion at this time, his eyes are wide open, but there is no trace of movement. Seeing this, Empress Zhongsun hurriedly said, "Where is the imperial physician?" "Empress. This official is here. Quickly diagnose the retired emperor." "Your Majesty, this subject has just diagnosed that the retired emperor is fine." He was just shocked. At this time, he was just overly shocked. This subject has already sent someone to boil some soup for the retired emperor to calm his nerves, not waiting for him to finish. Li Shimon and Li Qingxian also hurried over. At this moment, Li Shimon was still wearing his armor. If it wasn't for Xiao Gizi and Li Qingxian surrounding him, he might have already been tripped by the Jianghu guards. At this moment, Li Shimon first glanced in shock at the palace that was almost blown into ruins. Then, he hurriedly came to the pavilion not far away. After looking up and down at Li Yuan, he asked, "Is there anything wrong with Imperial Father?" Empress Jiangsun anxiously pulled Li Shimin to the side and said, "Imperial Father is fine, he was just frightened." "But what happened? Where did this assassin come from?" Li Shimin glared at Li Qingxian, then hurriedly comforted her, "Don't worry, Guanyin. This wasn't done by an assassin, en?" When Empress Jiangsun heard this, she was momentarily stunned. Then, she looked at Li Shimin. She saw that he was wearing armor from head to toe. Li Qingxian also didn't know what he was wearing. He was wearing all sorts of strange things. Although the armor that Li Shimin was wearing right now was specially made, other than the color, its appearance was almost the same as the original Mingguang armor. Therefore, Empress Jiangsun didn't see anything wrong. She asked in surprise, "Second brother, you're wearing this armor? You're still saying that there isn't an assassin?" Li Shimin was instantly speechless. He kicked Li Qingxian and said, "Unfilial son, quickly tell your imperial mother what exactly happened." At this moment, Zhang Sun Wugo discovered that Li Qingxian was wearing a green color. Moreover, it was that kind of earthy green. Not to mention, this attire, no matter how one looked at it, he looked like a barbarian. How could this not make her angry? "Qian, what are you wearing? Quickly change into this empress's clothes." Li Qingxian had never seen Empress Jiangsun Wugo so angry before. Seeing this, he was a little confused. He hurriedly said, "Imperial mother, don't be impatient. This son's clothes can wait. Why don't we deal with this first?" Li Shimin also mediated, "Qingxian is right. This matter can be discussed later. Tell me, what the hell is going on?" Li Shimin felt that there was no need to waste time on this matter. This would only attract more people's attention to the special things on Li Qingxian's body. Hearing Li Shimin say this, Zhang Sun Wugo couldn't say anything. She could only say, "Tell me first, what happened?" Hearing this, Li Qingxian stammered, "Imperial mother, this thing was actually created by a cannon. Tonight, this son originally wanted to let Imperial Father leave to take a look. However, this thing is rather precious and confidential. Furthermore, Imperial Father was in a meeting with the military at that time. Therefore, this son decided to temporarily leave this thing with the retired emperor, cannon." Zhang Sun Wugo had heard of it before. The crux of the problem at that time was how to explain this place. Thinking about this, Empress Zhang Sun Wugo was furious. She pointed at the ruins that were still burning not far away and said, "So, you let the retired emperor play with fire?" Chapter 1663. Empress Jiangsun was so angry that she almost fainted. These days, because of the Tujue going south, the palace was in an uproar. She had just finished dealing with the matters of the imperial harem with great difficulty and eliminated the hidden dangers and suspicions. Before she could catch her breath, such a thing happened. How could this not make her angry? This was all money. This loss, had to be repaired, right? Where did this money come from? Besides, how was she going to explain this to the people outside? In the middle of the night, there was a sudden accident in the palace. The retired emperor's bedroom was blown up by fire. How was she going to explain this to the people outside? Thinking of this, Empress Jiangsun was so angry that her whole body was shaking. Seeing this, Li Shimin hurriedly supported Jiangsun and said, "What are you still standing there for? Quickly go and deal with this mess." How could Li Qingxian not see Li Shimin's expression? He hurriedly accepted the order and ran out. After Li Shimin comforted Empress Jiangsun and let people send her, Li Yuan and the others away. Only then did she hurriedly follow Li Qingxian to the place where the cannon was placed. The cannon was very big. It was placed on the lawn outside Li Yuan's bedroom, Yangxin Palace Hall. Moreover, there was a large carriage beside the cannon. At this time, Li Shimin and Empress Jiangsun did not dare to raise the torch. They just looked at the cannon in the light of the burning fire. The cannon originally had 2 iron wheels, but at this time, one of the wheels had already sunk deep into the mud, and the other one was also broken. It looked a little strange. The material of the cannon was like a large iron rod. There was not a trace of decoration on it. At this time, the barrel of the cannon still had a trace of residual heat. The muzzle of the cannon still had the smell of gunpowder and wisps of smoke entwined around it. At the back of the cannon barrel, at the position of Li Shimon's armrest, there was a protruding place. There was a cover at this place. It was unknown what it was for, but when the cover was opened, a gust of gunpowder smoke instantly choked Li Shimon and forced him to retreat. Li Shimon covered his mouth and asked in a low voice, "This is that cannon?" "Yes, Imperial Father. This is it." Li Shimon pointed at the lid and asked, "Then, what is this?" "Imperial Father, this is the place to fill the ammunition. You only need to fill the cannonballs. The cannonballs are gunpowder. Look, this is it." As Li Qingshan explained, he took out a cannonball the size of a head from a metal box on the metal car and handed it to Li Shimon. The artillery shell was oval in shape and had a bottleneck on it. Some stripes were engraved on it. It didn't look beautiful at all. Li Shimon waited for a moment and instantly had an evaluation. The entire cannon looked very ordinary. Wasn't it just a large iron pipe with 2 wheels installed on it? However, could this toy really destroy the entire Yangxin Palace Hall? Li Shimon was in disbelief. After all, he and Li Qingshan didn't see the scene of the test at the smelting workshop. At this moment, when he saw the head-sized object and the huge hole in the middle of the Yangxin Palace Hall, which occupied more than 2 mu of land, he couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Could such a small thing really cause such great destruction? Li Shimon couldn't help but feel agitated. He couldn't help but ask, "Is this toy really so powerful?" Li Qingshan swallowed his saliva and said, "Imperial Father, why don't we give it a try?" In an instant, the two of them couldn't help but shiver. Li Shimon's expression changed and he asked, "Did you say the same thing when the retired emperor asked you a question just now?" Li Qingshan hurriedly said, No, just now, the retired emperor was just playing around and didn't ask anything." "Oh yes, Imperial Father, it seems that the retired emperor knows more about this than we do." Li Shimon suddenly remembered that this thing was witnessed by the retired emperor. Although it was just a test shot, this toy didn't seem to be difficult. It was nothing more than putting the shell in the cover and that was it. How could the retired emperor not know such a simple thing? Li Shimon was speechless. He was even a little angry. This was not something a human would do. Li Shimon took a deep breath and looked at the shell in his hand. Instantly, his back felt numb. Just one of these things was already so powerful. What would happen if it exploded? Li Shimon hurriedly threw the shell in his hand to Li Qingshan and waved his hand in annoyance. "You have to settle this before dawn. Otherwise, I'll teach you a lesson in the morning court." Li Qingshan felt wronged. But what could he do? One was Lao Tzu and the other was his grandfather. His grandfather was in trouble and he didn't stand up for him. What could he do? Although he felt wronged when he saw the power of this shell, his chances of winning the battle against Chotzi were even greater. Although there were only 10 cannons. At this moment, 1 cannon blew up his grandfather's bedroom. If 10 cannons were fired at the same time, Li Qingshan felt excited just thinking about it. Chapter 1664. Long live the Emperor. The next morning. To be precise, it was 6 hours later. He had just finished dealing with the matters in Yangxin Palace Hall when it was time for the morning court. Li Qingshan hurried back to change into his court attire. As soon as he arrived at the political announcement hall, he heard Xiao Gizi singing. Li Shimon waved his hand tiredly. The morning court had officially begun. At first, Wei Jing hurriedly reported, "Your Majesty, what happened in the palace last night at 1:00 in the morning?" "This morning, on my way to the court, I heard someone say that there was a thunderstorm. I'm afraid there's a change." The supervisor of the imperial astronomer also hurriedly complained, "Your Majesty, I've been observing the stars recently and I didn't find any signs of disaster. However, the sudden appearance of the thunderstorm last night was really strange. Everyone in the imperial astronomer has been busy since 1:00 in the morning. It's only now that we found out that it was a thunderstorm from the sky, which means there's a change. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. At this time, almost everyone in the court had different guesses. Almost every department seemed to be telling what they were doing after the incident last night, but in fact, they were telling the emperor. They didn't sleep last night because they had been busy with this matter. However, at this time, only the people in the military department didn't say anything. After all, Yu Qigong, Qing Yao Jin, and Qin Xiong from the military department didn't say anything. They were calm and composed. Even if they had something to say, they had to hold it in. This was the rule of the military department. If the boss didn't say anything, if they dared to say anything, they would be beaten up when they went back. No one could avoid it. This was the rule of the military department. At this time, Li Shimin also saw the problem. He ignored the crowd and looked at the military department. My dear ministers, do you have anything to say? Hearing this, Yu Qigong, Qing Yao Jin, and Qin Xiong looked at each other and then said, Your Majesty, we don't know what happened in the palace last night, so we can't make wild guesses. However, after the incident last night, we sent 5,000 elites to wait for Your Majesty's orders. And the defense of the entire Chang'an city has been strengthened several times. We didn't find anything unusual. We think that if we want to investigate this matter, we should go to the palace. How dare you? Yu Qigong, how dare you? That's the Forbidden Garden. What are you thinking? How dare you barge into the Forbidden Garden? Your Majesty, Yu Qigong has been sentenced to death. At first, Li Shimin nodded repeatedly as he listened. However, the sudden voice of the civil officials made him extremely displeased. He waved his hand indifferently and said, Then, Lord Zhou, do you have any good ideas? Hearing Li Shimin's words, the Minister of Rights, who had been making the most noise, was instantly silenced. His expression quickly changed as he said, Your Majesty, this matter must be investigated from within the palace. However, this matter is of great importance. I feel that Your Majesty should personally, enough, shut up. At the end of the day, he just didn't want to care. Li Shimin looked indifferently at the Minister of Appointments and said, As the Minister of Rights, you don't know what to do when something happens in the palace. Minister Yuqi only spoke his opinion and it was a capital offense. What do you think your punishment should be? Instantly, the faces of the ministers who had just jumped up changed slightly. The Minister of Rights' face was as pale as paper. Seeing this, Li Shaogong hurriedly said, Your Majesty, this matter concerns the dignity of the emperor. Therefore, I feel that this matter should be investigated thoroughly. It should be handed over to the Supreme Court to investigate. Seeing this, Li Shimin nodded. My dear minister, you are right. However, I saw what happened last night with my own eyes. Nothing happened in the palace. Let's not talk about this matter for the time being. What? Your Majesty saw it with his own eyes? Then, what the hell is going on? Hearing this, Wei Jing hurriedly said, Your Majesty, may I ask what exactly happened in the palace last night? I want to give an explanation to the people of Chang'an. Last night, everyone in Chang'an heard that sound. If Your Majesty, Last night, I was doing divination with Minister Yuan Tiangang in the palace. By chance, we talked about repairing the east and west markets. While chatting, my interest was piqued and I made some lime powder, then it caused such a noise. Yuan Tiangang? Lime powder? What did this mean? Everyone was instantly dumbfounded. Only Wei Zhang and a few others remembered what happened on the mountain when they heard the emperor mention lime powder. Zhang Feng used this thing to fry fish. And the noise caused by that, but at this moment, Wei Zhang's expression suddenly became strange. This was definitely not the sound of frying fish with lime powder. That thing was not so loud, unless it was a cannon. Did Feng Ziba make that thing? Apart from Wei Zhang, Fang Xianling, Zhang Sun Wuji, Yu Qigong, and others all remembered this idea. They couldn't help showing a touch of excitement in their eyes at this time. After all, what they wanted to discuss today was the matter of the crown prince guarding the border. At this time, Li Shimin waved his hand and said, This matter ends here. If you have any questions after the court, you can ask Prime Minister Wei. Prime Minister Wei knows what is going on. The war in Xiaozi has been going on for some time. Minister Yuqi, let's talk about the war in Xiaozi. Li Shimin saw the opportunity and pushed the problem to Wei Zheng. After all, Wei Zheng also knew about this matter. At this time, what they needed to deal with was the crown prince guarding the border. Although he had this cannon and had seen the power of the cannon, Li Shimin was still a little worried. Chapter 1665. In this regard, Li Shimin didn't dare to make any assertions. After all, once something happened, it would be a big deal. The crown prince's matter was of great importance. He also knew that if the crown prince wanted to go to the border, someone in the imperial court would definitely stop him. At this time, even he himself was a little hesitant, so he wanted to see what the ministers thought. At this time, Yu Qigong also told him about the matter of Qiuzi and Longyu Road. Almost all of them were about the lack of clothes, food, or armaments. However, he didn't mention a single word about the new weapons. Once this matter was mentioned, not to mention whether these people understood it or not, these people would definitely impeach this and that because of the money, materials, and manpower used to make these weapons. Li Shimin didn't want to hear this voice, either. After all, it was the emperor himself who ordered to supervise this matter. Li Shimin actually knew what Yu Qigong was going to say last night. Hearing this, he pretended to be thinking about it and said, "Dear ministers, the matter of Qiuzi city is related to the safety of the west gate of the Tang dynasty. At this time, you also know what's going on in the imperial court. Which minister can solve the problem of armaments?" This, in an instant, the lively discussion that had just been going on disappeared in an instant. At this time, because of the appearance of reward the good and punish the evil, almost all the affairs in the imperial court were clear. They even knew what was in the treasury of Chang'an city. Therefore, at this moment, the emperor's words made this group of people, who only knew how to talk, shut up in an instant. Li Shimin ignored them and asked, "Beloved official Yuqi, have you distributed the cotton-padded clothes required for military use this year?" Hearing this, Yu Qigong sighed and said, "Your Majesty, I've talked with the two ministers of the Ministry of Works, Du Ji, and got the answer. It will take another month to get 50,000 thick cotton clothes. However, winter has just arrived, so things will be slightly better in Qiuzi. However, Liangzhou, Ganzhou, Shazhou, and other places are located at the foot of Mount Qilian. Right now, snow is already swirling in these places, and the temperature is plummeting. If it hasn't been through winter, I'm afraid that unforeseen events will happen. Moreover, these prefectures are located at the rear of Qiuzi city. If the rear is unstable, it will only cause the soldiers at the front line to panic." Li Shimin's expression sank as he asked, "Why didn't you report this earlier? Didn't we remember that this matter was reported in June? Why is it still like this when winter is about to enter the 12th lunar month?" "Du Ji, Ministry of War, Ministry of Works, can you give me an explanation?" The ministers' expressions changed when they heard this, and they hurriedly explained. But it was only in June and July when there was a locust plague, so they didn't have the time to deal with it. When the matter was over, all the mulberry trees had been eaten clean. When the mulberry trees died, there was naturally no food for the silkworms. Most of them died as well. No matter how powerful the Ministry of Works was, there was nothing they could do. But the emperor had been busy with other things and didn't have time to deal with this matter, so it was delayed until now. At this time, the more Li Shimin listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. After all, he did receive such a report in the past, but because of other things, he really forgot about it. The more he listened to these people, the angrier Li Shimin became. "Enough. We didn't come here to listen to your complaints. Give us a solution in 3 days. We'll leave this matter to Zhang Sun Wuji." Zhang Sun Wuji was a little speechless. But he still obeyed the order. Li Shimin knew that he would naturally have a solution. After this matter was settled, Li Shimin said again, "Today, I want to put the matter of the military supplies aside for the time being. Let's talk about the matter of Qiuzi first. Xing Province, Feng Province, and Tulikan, you all know about it, right? Then we won't say much. You've all seen this war. Right now, even Longyu Province and Chuozi Province are in dire straits, let alone Feng Province and Xing Province. This is a matter of wealth. Thus, we have decided to send the Crown Prince to Chuozi to guard the border. On the one hand, we will stabilize the morale of the army, and on the other, we will investigate how serious this matter is. What do you all think? Li Shimon's words immediately caused an uproar among the officials. They had heard about the Crown Prince's decision to guard the border before, but after what had happened some time ago and Tuli's sudden actions, they all believed that the emperor would not let the Crown Prince guard the border. After all, although guarding the border at this time would temporarily prevent riots due to the lack of food and supplies for the winter, it would definitely cause a sensation, especially when the Indian and Turkic armies joined forces. At this time, the morale of the army was slack, and the Crown Prince's sudden appearance was bound to make the war at the border extremely difficult to resolve. To go at this time, it simply didn't make sense. Instantly, all of the civil officials once again erupted with cries of protest and opposition. "Your Majesty, you absolutely can't do this, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, although the Crown Prince guarding the border can raise morale, if he goes now, not only will it not raise morale, it will also cause the entire Tang dynasty to fall into a passive position, Your Majesty. Your Majesty, please reconsider." Chapter 1666. At this moment, along with the voices of opposition and discussion, there were rising voices. Even the military, Yu Qigong, and the others began to advise against it. After all, the Crown Prince guarding the border was a major matter. Once the Turks received the news, the difficulty of this campaign would increase by several times. This was absolutely not beneficial to the already complicated war situation at the border. On the contrary, it would lead to an even greater crisis, and it might even destabilize the situation at the border. What would the court officials think? At this moment, Li Shimon was also in a difficult position. He had originally thought that the Crown Prince's decision to guard the border was a little hasty. But after seeing the armor last night, Li Shimon felt that it was feasible. But after seeing the cannon last night, he completely hesitated. Although the cannon was very powerful, was it really suitable for the Crown Prince? Hearing the opposition of almost all the officials, Li Shimon couldn't help but ask, "Crown Prince, what do you think about this?" Li Qingxian actually had something to say, but he knew that he couldn't say it too early or too late. Hearing Li Shimon's words, he said, "Your Majesty. Sirs, you are right. This matter is indeed lacking in consideration. However, this son believes that if we go to the border, putting aside the war, even if this son is unable to resolve the crisis in the north, it is enough to stabilize the current situation in Longyu Dao." Hearing this, Li Shimon's eyes flashed with a hint of admiration. Just the aura he had just displayed, as well as the calmness and composure, made Li Shimon's eyes light up. Even many of the officials in the hall were somewhat surprised. They gradually quieted down, wanting to hear what Li Qingxian's plan was. Li Shimon waved his hand and asked, "At this time, all the soldiers and garrisons in Longyu Circuit lack winter clothes. Even if you are the Crown Prince, if you don't have something to help them survive this winter, will they trust you?" Li Qingxian bowed and calmly replied, "Imperial Father, although this son cannot solve the problem of the cold, this son's trip will mean the attention of the court, as well as Imperial Father's love. This is extremely important to the people's hearts. This is possible." Instantly, all the ministers were dumbfounded. They didn't even dare to think about such a thing. After all, if that was really the case, wouldn't it mean that the Crown Prince's trip this time would only be beneficial and not detrimental? Could it also give the soldiers who couldn't get winter clothes a sense of belonging, stabilize the morale of the army, and win the war? Although many officials had received the news that the emperor wanted the Crown Prince to guard the borders, the premise was that Xingzhou and Fengzhou were safe. However, not only did something happen in Feng Province and Xing Province, but the sudden change in the weather also exposed the lack of food and clothing in the army. Otherwise, how could the ministers be at ease? This was the Crown Prince, the hope of the Tang dynasty. Once the news of the Crown Prince guarding the border and the Tang dynasty's army reached the ears of the Turks, then, as a result, this war would only break out more fiercely. And if the Turks really captured the Crown Prince, what would the result be? At this time, seeing the officials like this, Li Qingxian was instead calm and composed as he said, I know what all of you are thinking about, but if there is someone who can finalize the winter supplies in the army in a short period of time, then what harm is there in not going? Instantly, everyone was speechless. Who dared to make a guarantee about this? At this time, the crown prince actually talked about such a thing. This, in an instant, everyone shut their mouths. Seeing this, Li Shimin couldn't help but sigh and say, the crown prince is right. The biggest crisis at this time is the winter supplies. Dear ministers, who has a solution? Silence. Silence. There was a deathly silence. Everyone consciously shut their mouths. They didn't dare to say a word. Li Shimin instantly felt a little suffocated in his heart. All the ministers and generals in the court, so many people, didn't even have a solution. This, alas. Li Shimin sighed deeply and said, I was also worried about the crown prince guarding the border, but I didn't know the situation in Longyu had become like this. Last night, I received an urgent message from Longyu, saying that countless soldiers of the Tang dynasty are suffering from the cold in Ganzhou, Shazhou and other places. Ministry of Works, Duji, and the Land Administration, I order you to come up with a solution in 3 days. No mistakes. At this time, the Land Administration, Duji, and the Minister of the Ministry of Works suddenly changed their faces. It turned the color of pig liver. But what could they do? At this time, the only things that could make winter clothes were nothing more than paper, mulberry, and hemp. But even if they had the raw materials now, it would take a lot of them. Moreover, the journey was long. It would take at least 1 or 2 months to make it. Li Shimin also knew about this, but what could he do? If they didn't make it now, it wouldn't be a good thing. After all, if they really did it, it would be a big deal. How could they make it? At this time, they couldn't help but ask for help. After hesitating for a while, Yu Qigong said, Your Majesty, I may have a solution in a short time. Chapter 1667. Do you really have a way? Li Shimin was shocked. He didn't think highly of this matter. After all, no one other than Feng Zi could produce so many armaments in such a short period of time. When Yu Qigong heard Li Shimin's question, he said with certainty, Your Majesty, have you forgotten that this water wheel has a great use? With that said, Li Shimin was instantly enlightened. He also remembered that Zhang Feng had said that this water wheel wasn't just used for the phosphate fertilizer factory. More importantly, it had to be used in other areas. For example, it could allow hundreds of weaving machines to work at the same time. This seemed a little ridiculous, but the appearance of the phosphate fertilizer factory gave Li Shimin hope. When the people of the 3 tribes saw that Yu Qigong had taken the initiative to take on this huge burden, they couldn't help but be secretly delighted. At this moment, Li Shimin said calmly, Then, I'll leave this matter to you and the 3 tribes. You must confirm the armaments of Longyu before the end of the year. Otherwise, I'll punish you severely. Your Majesty, we obey. Without waiting for Yu Qigong to agree, the people of the 3 tribes hurriedly agreed. Now that Yu Qigong was taking on the burden, they couldn't wait for it to happen. After that, when they discussed the phosphate fertilizer factory again, there was almost nothing to say. No one dared to say that the crown prince shouldn't go to the border anymore. It was fine if he didn't go, but he had to offer something, right? At the very least, he had to stabilize the morale of the army. Finalize it, right? But who among these people could handle it? Who had the ability to do so? No one. This was a matter of whether hundreds of thousands of soldiers could survive the winter. Who would be so stupid as to block it? Naturally, everyone agreed with the crown prince's decision to go to the border. After all, with Niu Jinda's personal protection and the crown prince's performance in Chang and city, this matter was almost set in stone. In addition, at this time, the phosphate fertilizer plant had officially started operations. This might be related to whether they could make a lot of money in the next year. Moreover, the phosphate fertilizer had been handed over to a few students from White Deer College. The Ministry of Works was in charge of it, but Li Shaogong was in charge of it. Although they didn't know who came up with this idea, this matter was beneficial to them and had no disadvantages. Today's morning court session lasted for a full 3 hours before it finally ended. The Minister of Agriculture, the Minister of Works, and the Minister of Duji had been waiting outside for a long time as soon as the imperial court ended. As soon as Yuqi Gong came out, the three of them hurried over to greet him. Lord Yuqi. Lord Yuqi, wait. Originally, Yuqi Gong, Qingyao Jin, Wei Zheng, and the others had been a bit puzzled by the muffled thunder in the palace last night and the emperor's vague attitude today. They had prepared to go to the emperor's place after morning court ended, but as soon as they left, they ran into these three. Yuqi Gong stopped in his tracks in surprise. A few of them hurriedly came forward and lit a cigarette for each of them. Only then did they say with a smile, Lord Yuqi, I can't thank you enough for today's matter. Now that this matter is over, how about we invite all of you out for a drink? Yuqi Gong and the others knew about this matter, but the three of them didn't. They knew the whole story. Yuqi Gong, Wei Zheng, and the others smiled and then waved their hands. Forget about the drink. It won't be too late to talk about it after this matter is over, but, since the three of you are so kind, why don't you go, old man Yuqi? Qingyao Jin took the opportunity to fan the flames. Although this matter wasn't a big deal to them, for the three of them, it was a matter that could cost them their lives. Moreover, it was a good thing to have the three ministries owe them a favor. At the very least, they would have to trouble them for many things in the future. For example, the Minister of Agriculture. And Duji. Yuqi Gong also understood Cheng Yaojin's words. He smiled and cupped his fists. Everyone, I still have important matters to attend to. This matter is quite complicated. Let's not drink today. I have to quickly investigate this year's mulberry and hemp. When the three of them heard this, they knew the importance of this matter. They hurriedly cupped their fists and said, Thank you very much, Lord Yuqi. We also have to go back and check the situation of the treasury. After saying that, Yuqi Gong and the others hurriedly left. After walking out of the Red Phoenix sect, they turned a corner and entered the East Palace through the Yanxi Gate. However, they didn't expect that the Emperor and the Crown Prince were sitting in the East Palace, waiting. When the three of them entered the East Palace, they invited little Gizi over. As soon as they entered, they saw a huge thing covered with red silk placed in the center of the East Palace's main hall. Li Shimin also went straight to the point. Dear ministers, I know you all want to know what happened in the palace last night. Today, I will tell you that last night, the retired emperor blew up the Yangxin Palace Hall. In an instant. The few of them were completely stirred up. After all, this was a big matter. And the retired emperor actually blew up the Yangxin Palace Hall. What was going on? And he used the word blow up. Could it be, you guessed right. This thing is the divine weapon that Feng Zi tinkered with, the cannon. Chapter 1668. At this time. When they heard this, they were completely dumbfounded. They knew about the cannon, but now they saw it was real. Didn't that mean, furthermore, the sound of the cannon blast was enough to blow up the entire Yangxin Palace Hall? Although he didn't know what happened, he knew that the entire Yangxin Palace Hall must have been destroyed. Was this really the cannon that Zhang Feng said? They had heard Zhang Feng talk about this thing before, but now, the key was that it seemed a little too incredible. If one cannon was so powerful, did it mean that the 10 cannons Zhang Feng prepared this time were enough to pacify the more than 300,000 allied troops? Therefore, at this time, the few of them were staring at the thing wrapped in red cloth with burning eyes. Li Shimin didn't want to talk in riddles anymore. He waved his hand and personally lifted the red cloth. In an instant, a steel cannon appeared in the East Palace, and it was facing the gate. It looked quite strange and solemn. The cannon was not very complicated. It was an iron pipe about 10 feet long and slightly bigger than a wash basin. There were 2 big iron wheels under it, and 4 big iron balls in front and back supported the cannon. At this time, Li Qingxian introduced the use of each part of the cannon, and then said, Your Excellency, what do you think of this thing? What do you think? What do you think of this thing? Was there a need to ask? It was simply beyond their imagination. Wei Zheng said with a serious face, Your Majesty, this thing is good, but when the crown prince leaves, won't it be too conspicuous if he takes it with him? And it will definitely attract the covetous eyes of many people. It will do no good to the war in Xiaozi. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Wei is right. I think we should discuss this matter separately. After all, if this thing is leaked out, it will be disadvantageous to the war in the Tang dynasty. If the 300,000 allied troops attack together, Xiaozi will be in danger instantly. Moreover, the road in Longyu is long and narrow. People from the Turks often come to sell their sheepskin or goods. It's easy to hide spies among them. We can't do this. If something happens, we can't guard against it. Once they send a small group of elites to rob these armaments, the consequences, Your Majesty. Wei Zheng bowed and said, Your Majesty, please reconsider this matter. Li Shimin waved his hand and said, I've already thought about this. Those armaments are probably about to reach Liangzhou. Liangzhou? What's going on? Li Qingxian said, Your Excellencies, when Fengzi bought the long and narrow road from Lantian County to Shao Mountain, we didn't know what he was thinking at that time. Although there were many good fields on both sides of the only road from Shao Mountain to Lantian County, they were all dry land and useless to buy. However, a few days ago, Fengzi used this place and the foreign merchants at the foot of Shao Mountain to secretly transport something out. These people didn't even know what it was. Hiss. Not only Wei Zheng, but also Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin were shocked. Your Highness, do you mean that the cannon has been transported out of Chang'an? Li Qingxian nodded and said, Yes. Moreover, it was Arkanan who persuaded a few merchants who had been in close contact with Shao Shan and the Chang and tobacco factory to give me these things. Therefore, even if some people were suspicious about this matter, at this time, because I was going to guard the border, they would give in. Everyone's attention won't be focused on this small caravan. Now that he put it that way, it made sense. But there was a problem. That was, what about the cannon? Although those cannons had been transported out, these people were foreigners after all. Therefore, they were the most likely people to betray them most of the time. After all, one could know a person for a long time without knowing his true intentions. If such a thing really happened, who could be sure? Li Qingxian didn't explain much. He just roughly explained the situation of the Yangxin Palace being bombed. Then Li Shimin said, I've decided to leave this cannon in the palace in case of accidents. My dear ministers, do you have any questions? No. How could they dare to have any objections? However, if they were to blow up the palace again, then it would be really fun. After all, this matter concerned the safety of the palace. Although he did not know whether that brat could be recreated or not, it was necessary to secretly prepare one at this time. After all, Feng Province and Xing Province were right above his head. He did not even know what the old mixed-hair Tuli was thinking. If by any chance he made a ruthless move, then, this cannon could also produce unexpected results. Your Majesty is wise. Li Shimin stood up with a smile and said, This time, Fengzi can be considered to have created a great merit for our Tang Empire. Once we have this thing, Yuqi, do you have the confidence to fight your way to the grasslands? Chapter 1669. Li Shimin did not dare to forget about attacking the Turks for even a moment. Therefore, after Zhang Feng made these divine weapons this time, Li Shimin's ambition grew. This was actually not much of an ambition. After all, with the Wei River Alliance and the Turks' plundering of the Tang dynasty for a long time, not to mention Li Shimin, every Tang wanted to slaughter these damn barbarians with their own hands. However, these barbarians came and went without a trace. The terrain of the grassland was extremely complicated. Anyone who went there would be trapped in the grassland to death. This was what Li Shimin had always wanted to do but did not dare to do. After that, he encountered Zhang Feng's obstruction. The appearance of food gave him hope, but he could not wait any longer. After all, Tuli and Shili were attacking from the north and south at the same time. At this time, he still did not know their purpose. If he did not act, How could he let the people and soldiers of the Tang dynasty be at ease? How could he let Li Shimin be at ease? However, the problem was that although there were divine weapons now, could they really break into the Turks? They did not doubt the ability of these weapons, but because of the number of people and the problems in the army at this time. However, Li Shimin did not give them a chance to explain. He waved his hand and suppressed the words that they wanted to say. Then, he said, I know what you are thinking. You just want to persuade me to wait until after the spring harvest to talk about this. I'm just talking about this. When the time comes, it will be best if we can defeat or destroy them and break into the Turks at the same time. But, if we can't, then forget it. Hearing this, Yu Qigong and others breathed a deep sigh of relief and said, Your Majesty is wise. Li Qingshan hurriedly said, Father, there is one thing that I don't understand about Qiuzi this time. Go ahead. Seeing Li Shimin agree, Li Qingshan said, Father, at this time, there are military issues in Liangzhou, Ganzhou, Shazhou, and other places, but there is no news about Qiuzi. Is this because it is not cold for the time being? Or is it because the news there is blocked at this time and there is no report? Speaking of which, Li Shimin couldn't help but look at Qing Yaojin. Regarding this matter, Qing Yaojin, who was in charge of the Longyu garrison, should have the most right to speak. However, Qing Yaojin acted as if he didn't know about this matter. He evaded the topic and said, Your Majesty, this subject doesn't know about this matter for the time being. Qiuzi is located in an important trade area between the Tang dynasty and the western regions. This subject believes that there should be a large number of merchants' winter reserves there. Therefore, there shouldn't be a problem for the time being. As he spoke, Qing Yaojin hurriedly gave Yu Qigong a look. Yu Qigong was a little speechless, but he still said, Your Majesty, I think so too. At this moment, Li Qingshan said, Since that's the case, I have no more questions. Then, go and prepare. Li Shimin said and left the East Palace in a hurry. After Li Shimin left, several old generals, Wei Zheng, and the others also left in a hurry. Although the matter of the crown prince guarding the border had been settled, they still needed to arrange how many soldiers to send, how many guards to send, and so on. Li Qingshan also had a lot of heavy work to do. For example, he needed to go to the ancestral temple to pay respects and bid farewell to the retired emperor and the empress. This delay took a total of 6 hours. After Li Qingshan arrived with a dozen large chests and a group of palace maids and guards, Li Qingshan had finished his preparations. Li Shimin personally read the declaration of war, and only then did Li Qingshan leave in a hurry. That scene seemed to want the entire Cheng and city to know. At this time, Cheng and city was already full of people. At this time, the people had already recovered from the joy of the phosphate fertilizer, and only then did they know about the war in Qiuzi. Although taxes and other things would increase once a war broke out, because of the previous example of the Wei River Alliance, not only did the people not object, but almost all of them came to see the crown prince off when they heard that he was guarding the border. However, there was only one person who was basking in the sun and drinking wine on the small balcony of White Deer College. Wasn't he carefree and unfettered? Who else could it be other than Zhang Feng? Last night, Zhang Feng had not slept since the explosion of the cannon. He had been waiting for news of the mansion's soldiers coming to his doorstep. At daybreak, the government soldiers still didn't come. Zhang Feng couldn't sit still anymore. He directly hired a sedan chair and wandered around Cheng and city. He even went to Niu Pai Huang's rubber factory for 2 hours. Although the rubber factory had moved to the mountains, the rubber workshop in Tonghuifang still existed. Now, not only were they making rugby balls and basketballs, but they were also making compact rubber products, such as rubber pipes, which ranged from the size of chopsticks to the size of a wash basin. To put it bluntly, this was his ancestral skill of making cowhide, and he couldn't bear to pass it on to outsiders. In addition, Zhang Feng had taught him some skills of making rubber, so he didn't dare to easily pass it on to outsiders. Although he was in charge of the rubber factory on the mountain, his disciples, and his wife were all competent, so he had more time to come here and study this thing. What was this? This was all money. And most importantly, In Chang'an City, his wife and children were now on the mountain, and even his children had entered the academy because of Zhang Feng. Now that he had money, if he didn't drink, wouldn't he feel sorry for himself? Chapter 1670. Zhang Feng also came to his senses after being reminded by Niu Pai Huang. He repeatedly claimed that Niu Pai Huang had inherited the old ancestors' teachings. Perhaps this was the laziness of the people in Guangzhou. Once they had money, their pockets would swell. They would be able to walk their dogs, play with birds, and drink with girls. Moreover, there were basketball, rugby, and even poker cards that Zhang Feng had created. With so many entertainment activities, how could the people of Chang'an let go of them during the autumn planting period? Not to mention Niu Pai Huang. Just as Zhang Feng's imagination was running wild, wondering when he would be able to be like them and truly let go of everything and wander around without any restraints, a voice suddenly rang out. Jing Shu and Zhang Yuyao, who were sitting at the side and chatting idly, seemed to be attracted by something. They looked downstairs not far away. At this moment, a shout came from downstairs. Madams, Old Wei, and the others are here. They say they want to visit Old Master. As they spoke, they saw Wei Zheng and the other four slowly walking over from the water wheel in the middle of the villa area not far away. The two women looked at Zhang Feng with a strange expression. Didn't he just come back? Why did he come back as soon as he stepped foot in? What was going on? But at this time, it was useless to think about it. The two women could only shake Zhang Feng awake and ask Xiao Cui, to invite the others up. Then, they left. As soon as they came up, they saw Zhang Feng in a daze. They were instantly angry and amused. I say, you ran really fast. Last night, you were still in the courtyard. Why did you come back to the mountain in the blink of an eye? Zhang Feng rolled his eyes and said, how can I not run? You all know what happened last night, right? If I don't run, am I going to wait for Li Gan to trap me and send me to jail? They looked at Zhang Feng speechlessly. Fang Xianling stroked his beard and interrupted Zhang Feng with a smile. You worry too much about this matter. If it was really a big mess, the emperor would have already issued an edict. But after all, this concerns the reputation of the imperial family. Under normal circumstances, the emperor would not intervene. But I heard that the retired emperor blew up his own Yangxin Palace Hall last night. When Zhang Feng heard this, his eyes almost popped out of their sockets. You said that the retired emperor blew up his own house last night? Fang Xianling nodded gloomily and said, isn't that so? Today, I heard that during the court session, some ministers asked about this matter, but His Majesty covered it up and buried it. I also heard that His Majesty is preparing to leave a cannon in the palace. At first, Zhang Feng was very happy to hear that. It was good that he could block it. But the more he listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. Why would he leave such a thing in the palace? Although the emperor did this for the sake of the safety of the palace, it was not safe for him to leave such a thing. What if some idiot decided to fire such a cannon at some time? Thinking of this, Zhang Feng hurriedly asked, nothing happened in the palace last night, right? To be precise, no one died, right? As long as no one died, then it was not a big problem. But once someone died, it would be a big problem. Although the emperor had suppressed this matter, it still had to be solved. At this moment, Zhang Feng felt that there was a secret behind this matter. Especially after seeing Fang Xuanling's expression, Zhang Feng sat up from the recliner and asked, Old Fang, what's the matter? Tell me. Fang Xuanling's expression was not good, which made Zhang Feng's heart tighten. If something happened to the retired emperor, it would not be so bad. After all, this fool played with the cannon himself. But Zhang Feng was not sure. If this iron fool lit the cannon and stood at the muzzle, then, this was what Zhang Feng was most worried about. Fang Xianling stammered for a long time before he said, the retired emperor's 3 concubines are gone, but the rest are fine. Hearing this, Zhang Feng breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the retired emperor was fine, it was not a big problem. Is the retired emperor okay? He's fine. Seeing this, Zhang Feng lay down, lit a cigarette, and stretched lazily, as if he was ready to go back to sleep. They looked at him and said, "Fengzi, now, what do you think about the matter in the north?" Zhang Feng knew that these people must have come for something, and it must be something big. Sure enough, this thing came. Zhang Feng did not know about the war in the north. However, it was known from history that it was precisely because of this fuse that Li Shimin had the intention to kill, thus starting a war that lasted for several years. As for Qiuzi, as the most marginalized place in the Tang dynasty, it also suffered from war all year round. But most importantly, Zhang Feng dared to guarantee that this war in Qiuzi had never happened in history. But history did record that in the winter of the second year of Zhengguan, the Turks robbed Longyu, and the Tang army went out to fight, but they were defeated. There were only 25 words. So Zhang Feng did not know whether this was true or not. Therefore, Zhang Feng was more concerned about Qiuzi than Fengzhou and Xingzhou. At this time, he saw that these people were still asking about this matter. Zhang Feng was also interested and said, "It's time to educate you people about the meaning of the national war." Chapter 1671. War of Nations. This was a new term. However, for Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin, this was equivalent to opening a new door for them. Qing Chumo and the others originally wanted to come, but because of this matter, Wei Zheng and the others instructed them to send Li Qingqian off. After all, the lack of winter clothes in the army was only known to the officials and a few people in the imperial court. Once this matter was spread out, how could they not know how big of an uproar it would cause? Moreover, these people were famous for their big mouths. Who would dare to tell them such an important matter? The reason why Zhang Xian had come to look for Zhang Feng today was to ask Zhang Feng if there was a way to resolve the matter. After all, previously, Zhang Feng said that he had a way to make more than 100 textile machines automatically weave cloth. At this moment, seeing that Zhang Feng seemed to be interested, they hurriedly sat up straight and asked, "Fengzi, what is this war of nations?" Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "Before asking this, I have to ask if you still remember the national tussa." National tussa. How could they not know about this? They couldn't help but nod and say, "We remember." Zhang Feng heard and said, "Since you know about the national tussa is the rivers and mountains of the country, which is also the fate of the country. And this war of nations, as the name suggests, is a war between two countries." At this time, Shili and Tuli launched an invasion at the same time. In fact, one of them is real and the other is just a test. At the beginning, when we were at the foot of the mountain, I told Laoli that Tuli was going to the south. At this time, he chose this place to test us and ask for some money, food, and war horses from the Tang dynasty. After all, we made him anxious with a knife last time. At this time, the internal war of the Turks broke out. Plus, at this time, the Turks and the Indian army. Didn't you think of anything else? Zhang Feng thought that they would be able to respond, but when he finished speaking, he saw that they were all smoking and staring at him. He couldn't help but sigh. He said, "The Turks have the most frequent contact with our Han people. But if you check the history, when did the Turks ever fight together with others? Never." When Zhang Feng said that, Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin couldn't help but gasp. "Fengzi, it really is as you said. The Turks have never worked with anyone, but that doesn't mean anything." Wei Jing could not help but frown, but he had a different explanation. "Old Yu, old Chen, the two of you should calm down. Fengzi is right. These 2 years, I've been paying more attention to the affairs of the Turks. The Turks are arrogant and eccentric, and they disdain fighting with others. They believe in the heavenly wolf. As for wolves, they are extremely unruly. Have you ever seen a pack of wolves hunting with a tiger?" After asking this question, Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin were even more confused. "You mean to say that the Turkic Khaganate and Indian alliance at this time means that he has a bigger plan?" But in the next moment, Wei Jing refuted Qing Yaojin and Yu Qigong's words. He said, "I think that they have reached a point where they can't do anything without external help. After all, as Fengzi said last time, we got a lot of cattle, sheep, and horses from the Turks. I even heard that most of the Turks don't have any cattle or sheep. They even exchanged their warhorses for food. So, Fengzi is saying that the Turks and the Indians are working together to divert the crisis on their side? Zhang Feng pointed at Wei Zheng and praised, look at old Wei. It's good to read a lot. Look at him, he can understand this point easily. Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin's faces darkened when they heard that. They felt that he was laughing at them for being illiterate. Seeing this, Zhang Feng's eyelids twitched. He hurriedly said, well, what I mean is, the Turks are doing this because they haven't completely solved their food shortage, and they don't have enough warhorses. However, they are jealous of the things that the Tang dynasty has now. Seeing that winter is coming, they have no choice but to start this war. And their purpose this time is not just to plunder. They want to go straight to the root of the problem. That is, their purpose is the vast Tang dynasty. What? In an instant, everyone was in an uproar. If that's the case, doesn't it mean that Tuli from the north is playing for real this time? At this time, the crown prince was guarding the border. Didn't it mean that the danger would be doubled? At the thought of this, their expressions changed abruptly. Fengzi, is what you said true? Zhang Feng nodded and said, how can it be false? Not only that, but Tufan, Tu, and Hun Gao will also be implicated because of this matter. Therefore, the current war in the north does not depend on when he will attack, but on when the heavens will allow him to attack. If the heavens are on his side, Tuli in the north will only return empty-handed this time. However, this also depends on the crown prince's situation at the border. Chapter 1672. Look at the situation of the crown prince guarding the border. How could they look at it? At this time, their expressions changed again. Even Wei Zheng was ready to go down the mountain immediately to stop the crown prince from guarding the border. Zhang Feng didn't know what was wrong with Wei Zheng. He hurriedly said, old Wei, what are you going to do? I'm going to stop the crown prince from guarding the border. At this time, the crown prince is taking the important military equipment of the Tang dynasty to Qiuzi. If there is an accident on the way, won't there be a big problem? No. Sit down. Don't be impatient. Zhang Feng hurriedly pressed Wei Zheng down and said, old Wei, this is a matter of the imperial court. What are you anxious about? Wei Zheng was stunned. Only then did he realize that he was careless. Fang Xianling hurriedly said, well, old Wei is not worried about that. He is worried about the military equipment and cannons that the crown prince is personally escorting, as well as Lao Li's son. If these cannons fall into the hands of the Turks, then it will be dangerous. Zhang Feng waved his hand carelessly and said with a smile, do you think I'm stupid? I'll install the whole thing and then send it over. Qing Yaojin couldn't help but pat Zhang Feng on the shoulder. In an instant, Zhang Feng's face suddenly turned pale. In this short moment, the house was almost destroyed. Qing Yaojin was so scared that he hurriedly put Zhang Feng on the rocking chair, patted his chest, and slit his neck. He couldn't wait to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Wei Zheng glared at Qing Yaojin angrily. He was about to go forward and argue with him when Zhang Feng finally calmed down. After a violent cough, many people finally woke up. They asked in confusion, what happened just now? Why do I suddenly feel like the sky is falling? When they heard this, they didn't know what to say. They could only laugh it off and avoid this matter. Then, Qing Yaojin hurriedly asked, Feng Zi, at this time, if you don't let me go and save people, you should at least tell me your plan, right? We're old brothers, what's so hard to say? Don't you think you're asking for a beating? Zhang Feng rubbed his aching shoulder. It took him a long time to recover. He stared at Qing Yaojin suspiciously. He seriously suspected that he had been plotted against by this person, but Zhang Feng had no evidence. In addition, Qing Yaojin was thick-skinned. At this moment, his face was not red nor was he panting. Zhang Feng could do nothing about it. He could only say, although those things were given to the merchants of the western regions to transport, I have already secretly placed them in the official salt team. Moreover, I have taken these things apart. Other than Li Gan, no one else knows how to assemble them. Otherwise, why would I let Li Gan go? This time, Li Gan went to Chuzi for two reasons. On the one hand, he wanted to train. On the other hand, the most important thing was to show off our firearms and military command ability. This was something I fought hard for. This time, the Crown Prince went. This is also a good thing. After all, with a big head like him, no one will notice Li Gan. This way, it will be much easier to do things. If only that was the case. The key was that everyone here knew that the Crown Prince was Li Gan, and Li Gan was the Crown Prince. At this moment, Zhang Feng's words meant that there were interceptions along the way. Wei Zhang's face suddenly darkened. Feng Zi, this is a serious matter. It is not something that only Li Gan can deal with. From what I heard, you mean that the Crown Prince's journey to the border is not peaceful? Zhang Feng nodded. Of course. Who is the Crown Prince? He is the future of the Tang dynasty. Whoever can get his hands on him will practically own the west gate of the Tang dynasty. Hearing this, everyone's face suddenly changed. Well, tell us, do you have any ideas? The Crown Prince. Once he and those cannons fall into the hands of the Turks, then how can the Tang dynasty be safe? Feng Zi, say something. Stop arguing. Let's see what Feng Zi has to say. Zhang Sun Wuji, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said loudly. After calming everyone down, he said, Feng Zi, this is a serious matter. If you have any plans, why don't you tell us? Zhang Feng shrugged and said, I really don't have any good ideas. This matter will depend on how Li Gan, the Crown Prince, and Niu Jijie handle it. I have already asked Tai Niu and the others to tell Niu Jijie about this matter. As for what happened on the road, it is actually a kind of trial. It will be of great help to the Crown Prince and Li Gan. Don't worry about it blindly. Instead of worrying about it blindly, why don't you think about how to deal with the Turks in the north, or think about what to eat to be safe later? After hearing Zhang Feng's words, although they were still a little worried, after all, this matter was of great importance. But seeing that Zhang Feng seemed to have prepared for it, if they said too much at this time, they would only expose their identities. They discussed. Then, they temporarily suppressed all the thoughts in their hearts. After all, the 5,000 elites accompanying them and Niu Jinda were not to be trifled with. With so many people, unless the Turks came with several times more people, it was really impossible for them to stop the Crown Prince and the others. It was more reasonable. Among the things they brought, there was the indestructible long hair and the powerful crossbow that could be fired instantly. Once these things were used, although there was a risk of being exposed, the Crown Prince's safety was assured. Chapter 1673. And at this time, the armaments and other important things had been sent out in batches. It was too late to recall them now. And Xuezi City couldn't wait that long. At this time, although everyone was still worried, they could only observe quietly. After all, they knew Niu Jinda's ability. And these 5,000 elites were all wearing special bulletproof vests. As long as these people were there, the Crown Prince's comfort would not be a problem. Moreover, this was the Long Yu Dao of the Tang dynasty. Once the Turks entered the Tang dynasty, he would immediately send the message to all provinces and prefectures. In this case, what's wrong with the Crown Prince's comfort? Although they didn't know Zhang Feng had dismantled those armaments, if Zhang Feng said it was fine, then it should be fine. By the way, Old Wei, you just said Feng province. What's the situation in Feng province and Xing province now? Zhang Feng asked curiously. Wei Jing took a deep breath and said, at this time, the weather in Feng province and Xing province is really cold as you said. And I heard from Lord Zhangsun that Master Yuan Tiangang did divination in person, and it was confirmed that there will be snow in Feng province and Xing province soon. Perhaps, this snow is the reason for their retreat? Hearing this, Zhang Feng's eyes flashed with a touch of shock. Yuan Tiangang. This awesome person in the Tang dynasty was really awesome. Zhang Feng remembered that the legendary pushback diagram was a book that was banned from being circulated to foreign countries until he transmigrated in the future. And before his time travel, Zhang Feng remembered that this book was called a divine book in the Chinese department. It was not because of how gorgeous his writing was or how awesome his drawing was, but because of the things predicted in the pushback diagram. Of these matters, less than 7 had been analyzed. However, these 7 people had already been clearly arranged. What did this mean? This was a divine book that spanned thousands of years. This was the first year of the Tang dynasty. Not only did Yuan Tiangang predict Wu Zetian's ascension to the throne, but he also predicted Yang Guifei's rebellion and Ma Weipa's death. Just this alone was enough to shake the entire world, not to mention those unknown things. Previously, Zhang Feng had really forgotten about this person. However, after hearing Wei Zhang's words, the pushback painting and Li Chunfeng instantly occupied his mind. He hurriedly hooked his arm around Wei Zhang's neck and asked, "Old Wei, I have a favor to ask. When can you arrange for me to meet Master Yuan?" Wei Zhang felt a little strange. However, he was also looking forward to the meeting between the two. One was the most famous master of strange arts in the Tang dynasty, and the other was the most famous swindler in the Tang dynasty. What kind of sparks would erupt when these two people interacted? Although Wei Zhang was looking forward to it. However, this was not the time to talk about this. He said, "If there is a chance in the future, I will tell the Lord Zhangsun about this. As for whether Master Yuan will meet you or not, it's hard to say." Seeing that there was hope, Zhang Feng rubbed his hands and said, "Tell me, how did Master Yuan predict it?" Zhang Feng was more curious. Although he knew that people in ancient times could predict the future from the orbits of the stars and some natural means, he still wanted to know what method Master Yuan used. Wei Jing said, "I have heard about this, and Master Yuan is best at finding incense and asking for directions. As for what method he used, I don't know. If you want to know, you will know when you meet Master Yuan. However, there is one thing I am sure of. Master Yuan also predicted that this time, the Turks in the north will definitely retreat because of this wind and snow. However, today, the Lord Zhangsun came to us and told us a secret. Maybe the retreat mentioned by Master Yuan is not because of the snow, but because of the cold. At present, His Majesty has received a total of reports from Longyu, Yuzhou, and other stations. They are all about the issue of materials for the winter. I think this is not only a problem of the Tang dynasty, but also the key reason why Tuli appeared in Sheng and Feng provinces at this time. This time, the purpose of our visit is to ask you about the war against Jiuzi and Tuli in Feng province. Also, the issue of the military equipment. At this time, almost all of Liangzhou, Shazhou, Ganzhou, and other places have started to snow. However, almost all of our military equipment is from last year, as well as the equipment from summer and autumn. What do you think? Zhang Feng could not help but feel a little confused. Isn't this the matter of the Ministry of Works? Didn't they prepare for it? What does this have to do with me? Zhang Feng was instantly alert. It was definitely not a good thing to talk about this at this time. As expected, Wei Jing sighed and said, "Didn't we suffer from the plague of locusts this year? The leaves of the trees were all ruined. With this, all the mulberry trees are gone. Those who raise silkworms and plant hemp have almost no harvest this year. Say, even immortals can't do anything about this. I heard that His Majesty was furious in the court early this morning, but he had no choice. In the end, he ordered the Lord Zhangsun, the Ministry of Works, Duozhi, and the Agriculture Temple to find a solution. Otherwise, these people will lose their heads." "So, the Lord Zhangsun came to you and Laoli agreed? That's why you came to me?" At last, he asked with his eyes widened in disbelief. Although these people were sly old foxes, they really couldn't refute when their purpose was directly stated at this time. At this time, they even felt a little embarrassed. However, they really could not find a second person in this matter except for Zhang Feng. Therefore, at this time, Wei Zheng and Zhangsun Wuji cupped their hands and said, "Feng, no way. This matter is not negotiable. Goodbye. I still have something to do." Bye. Chapter 1674. What a joke. If you were to say that there was cotton or something like that, then it would be fine. In this entire era, let alone cotton, Zhang Feng had never even seen the shadow of cotton before. During the Tang dynasty, the winter temperature was no different from that of the south in the modern era. The temperature was also warm and pleasant. Longjiudo, Tubo, Shazhou, Ganzhou, and other places were also vast oases. Only after leaving Yumen Pass would one see the boundless desert. However, this did not mean that he did not feel cold during the winter. Chang'an was not cold. However, the places where there were garrisons were almost always the most difficult places. The environment and temperature in these places were the worst. However, in this magical era, the thing to pass the winter was actually strange paper clothes. If someone told Zhang Feng in the modern era that people wore paper clothes during the winter in the Tang dynasty, Zhang Feng would not even think about it and hit that person in the face with a shoe. However, when he saw those things for real, he fell silent. In this stupid era, there were actually people who wore paper clothes. This paper was a special kind of paper. It was made from the bark of a spring tree. It was ground into cotton and then made into paper. This kind of paper was thick and could absorb heat and sweat. Most importantly, after processing, this kind of armor was made into clothing. It was really comfortable. At the very least, this thing was enough to keep one warm for a winter. However, the problem in making this thing was that his paper-making technique was not developed. Even if he asked Zhang Feng to make this thing with his paper-making technique, he would not be able to make 100 caddies in a day. Most importantly, this thing had to be steamed at high temperature and paste to make clothes. This paper was not thin to begin with, so it had to be pasted with 30 layers of paste. If there were too few layers, it would break after a few times. If there were too many layers, it would be cumbersome. In this way, it would take almost 3 days to make a piece of clothing. Zhang Feng did not know how many garrisons there were in Longjiudo, but he knew that there were 100,000 soldiers in Chuzi City. 100,000 soldiers. Who knew how long it would take for him to make it? Wouldn't that be asking for his life? It would be strange if he could accept this job. He wasn't stupid. But once Zhang Feng left, they couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Seeing Zhang Feng slip away just like that, he did not know what to say. When Zhang Feng really went downstairs and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, the few of them woke up. Zhang Sun Wuji couldn't help but look at Zhang Feng, who had disappeared from his sight, and asked, "Old Wei, what do you think we should do now?" "Old Wei, this matter depends on you and Old Sun. Otherwise, I'm really dead," Yu Qigong said with a sobbing tone. He really didn't know what to do about this. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have made a promise in front of the emperor today. Otherwise, she wouldn't have caused so much trouble. But now, it was too late to say anything. Seeing this, Wei Jing couldn't help but sigh. "I think we still have to consider this matter at length. Think about it, no one would dare to accept this mission. At least 100,000 armaments in a month. How is that possible? And you made a promise in front of the emperor. The emperor also made a decision in front of everyone. This matter is too hasty." Yu Qigong was about to cry. He hurriedly stopped Wei Zheng and said, "I know. Don't be sarcastic, okay? Let's talk about this first. What should we do? Don't ask who's to blame now." Hearing this, Du Ruhui narrowed his eyes and said, "Why don't we go and ask Mr. Huai for help?" Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up in an instant. Du Ruhui was right. At this time, going to the old scholar might be the right thing to do. As for Yu Shinan and the others, there might not be any hope. After all, Yu Shinan and the others had expressed their stance last time. From now on, Zhang Feng was not allowed to stir up trouble again. He had told them that at this time, if they went to Yu Shinan, wouldn't they be asking for trouble? At the thought of this, how could they sit still? They all went to look for the old scholar. On the other side, after Zhang Feng left the villa, his mind was filled with the matter of clothes. Although he didn't care about what others thought. However, his family, the few Confucians on the mountain, the students, the craftsmen, and the people in Tonghui Fang all needed it. The people in Tonghui district and the craftsmen in the various workshops on the mountain worked every day to create today's White Deer College and the normal operation of the Daoist market. These people were the ones who really needed them. Moreover, the average temperature on the mountain was at least 5 degrees lower than that below the mountain. At this time, it was indeed a little cold from morning to night. Zhang Feng was also considering the matter of winter clothing. However, thinking was just thinking. It was also troublesome to do it. If he really wanted to do it, it would be difficult. After all, it was really difficult to not have cotton. This was already the biggest problem in front of Zhang Feng. At least until now, Zhang Feng really didn't think of any useful way to replace cotton. Even cashmere and goose down, you must have a machine to make it, right? Although there were many of these things, there was no time. There was only a month until the new year. In such a short time, there were more than 100,000 people. Even if Zhang Feng sacrificed his life, he couldn't make so many cotton-padded clothes. Chapter 1675. What Zhang Feng was worried about was, it would end badly if they did that. How could they do it without anything? That was one thing. The main source of the problem was that the time was too short. Even if they used water wheels to make unmanned textiles, they could not make so much in such a short time. Even the large garment factories of the later generations could not do it. Not to mention now. It could be said that although there were many people in the Tang dynasty now, it was useless. This thing was not something that could be done with a large number of people. Most importantly, there was no cotton or other substitutes in this era. Even the best ones that Zhang Feng knew were sheepskin jackets, rubber thermal jackets, and paper jackets. Although Zhang Feng knew all of these, he knew that the best ones were sheepskin jackets, rubber thermal jackets, and paper jackets. But when he thought about the needs of hundreds of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people, Zhang Feng felt a headache coming on. In this era, even if they added the cattle and sheep from Tubo and other countries, the Tang dynasty did not lack leather goods at this time, but it was difficult. Zhang Feng could not help but rub his forehead. Unknowingly, Zhang Feng had already arrived at the textile factory that was under construction. Once the textile factory was completed, the 3 major projects that Zhang Feng had mentioned were almost completed. The steel mill, the rubber factory, and the textile factory. But at this time, the textile factory was only a prototype. It was being built halfway up another mountain. Shao Mountain was divided into 2 mountains, and the whole Shao Mountain was like a gold ingot, sandwiched between the 2 mountains. On the mountain in the west, the forging workshop had been expanding all the way to the top of the mountain. And on the other side, it was the source of the water of the whole Shao Mountain, which was connected to the East Peak waterfall of Shao Mountain. It had almost become the main living area of Shao Mountain. The whole academy was built on the flat plain between the 2 mountains. At the foot of the mountain, there was a paper factory, a rubber factory, a food factory, and so on. At this time, standing halfway up the East Peak, Zhang Feng looked down at everything at the foot of the mountain. He was in disbelief. A few months ago, this place was still a wasteland. Who would have thought that in less than half a year, this place would become like this? Moreover, it had become a place comparable to Chang'an City. Zhang Feng knew that he couldn't do all of this. After all, he really didn't have the ability. All of this was the result of everyone's hard work. Zhang Feng couldn't understand why these people followed him. He was just doing what he wanted to do. It could be said that he was doing everything according to his heart. However, he hadn't noticed it before. Only when he turned around and looked down did he realize that there were actually so many people gathered around him. Zhang Feng looked at all of this with a headache. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Originally, he just wanted to start a business without relying on this unreliable system. However, this business was still in its initial stage, and he already encountered so many troubles. How could this not give her a headache? Now, although he refused to make winter clothes for the 100,000 people, what about the people on the mountain? These people all needed to survive the winter. Moreover, the temperature on Mount Kuei was much lower than that of Chang and city at the foot of the mountain because of its altitude. Although the temperature of Chang and in this era was very pleasant, it was still very cold in this winter. The clothes for these thousands of people became his biggest headache at this time. After all, more than 3,000 students, more than 50 Confucian scholars, more than 300 people in charge of logistics in Tonghuifang, more than 1,000 craftsmen, and Lao He. These people were all his old subordinates. However, at this time, a series of shouts pulled Zhang Feng back to reality from his thousands of thoughts. He saw that not far away, several craftsmen were cutting trees on the mountain. When a big tree not far from Zhang Feng fell down with a loud bang. Everyone also saw Zhang Feng, who was in a snow-white robe. Everyone was stunned at first, and then couldn't help but roar excitedly. "Dean! The Dean is here!" Along with the exclamation, Gan Ziyuan also hurried over with a stick in his hand. When he saw that it was really Zhang Feng, he was immediately wild with joy. "Dean, why are you here alone? You should have told me in advance." Gan Ziyuan. Zhang Feng was surprised. He hadn't seen him for a long time. At this time, Zhang Feng really didn't recognize him. After all, this time Gan Ziyuan was dressed a little shabby. Zhang Feng looked at Gan Ziyuan with some surprise, pointed at the wooden stick in his hand and asked, "Old Gan, you. What's wrong with you?" Gan Ziyuan heard, waved his hand and said with a smile, "Hey, you're talking about this. Isn't this for work? The weather is cold, so I came up the mountain to work and warm up. Let's go, I'll take you to the textile factory." Now the textile factory is amazing. While speaking, Gan Ziyuan pulled Zhang Feng in the direction of the textile factory. After Zhang Feng left, the people who went up the mountain were peeling the bark and arranging the wood. Zhang Feng looked at the red tree deeply, then looked at the thin clothes on Gan Ziyuan's body, and couldn't help but ask, "Old Gan, do the people who go up the mountain now wear such clothes?" Chapter 1676. Clothes again. This was the topic that Zhang Feng heard the most today. At this time, Zhang Feng was silent. Gan Ziyuan seemed to have noticed Zhang Feng's silence at this time and could not help but ask in surprise, "Dean, what's wrong with you?" Zhang Feng did not leave. Looking at the construction site that was bustling with activity not far away, he said, "Old Gan, tell me the truth. Are you all wearing unlined clothes?" Gan Ziyuan was stunned. He said indifferently, "We're the ones who put in the effort, so we can't wear thick clothes. Once we wear them, we won't be able to see anyone in less than 3 days." "Then, you were peeling the bark just now to make clothes?" Zhang Feng interrupted Gan Ziyuan and said, "Old Gan, what are these people peeling the bark for?" In an instant, Gan Ziyuan was silent. Looking at Zhang Feng's strange expression, he began to falter. "Well, it's going to be Chinese New Year soon, and the construction site needs wood. We're thinking of getting some bark while we're cutting down trees and hiring people to make some clothes. After all, thanks to the Dean, we've made a lot of money this year, so, my brothers wanted to buy some new clothes. I was worried, so I followed them. I didn't expect to run into the Dean. But we definitely didn't delay the construction. I can guarantee this with my head." Zhang Feng's breathing could not help but become a little rapid. Looking at the craftsmen who were peeling the bark and the craftsmen who were curled up in the corner, Zhang Feng suddenly felt that he seemed to have failed. No wonder the old scholar and Yu Shinan advised him not to go out again and to stay in the academy and deal with the academy's affairs. Zhang Feng did not understand before. But now, Zhang Feng finally understood. Things outside were a mess, and things at home were still a mess. What was there to do? There was simply no way to do it. Zhang Feng took a deep breath and pointed at the textile factory. "Old Gan, let me ask you. Do you know what this place is used for?" Gan Ziyuan saw Zhang Feng's dignified look and didn't dare to be careless. He hurriedly said, "I don't know, but I heard that it is a textile factory. It should be a weaving workshop. We have no right to ask the Dean's decision." We only know how to do what we should do. Over the course of a few months, Zhang Ruochen had been in a daze. Gan Ziyuan could clearly feel the changes on the mountain. Among the people he brought here, as well as the people he called here before, almost every craftsman was paid 10 copper coins a day. No matter where they were, they would receive such a high salary. The most important thing was that every 3 to 5 days, they could go to the cafeteria and have a free meal when the students were teaching. There was plenty of wine and meat. Furthermore, he would pay his salary on time every month, and he would never be late. These were enough for a stone golem to fuse, right? They were the lowest of the low, but in this place, they received the same treatment as the students. Sometimes, the students even had to come here to work, and work together with them. It was just like that. In this world, perhaps only White Deer College was like this. Zhang Feng's heart was slowly changing without him knowing. After a moment of silence, Zhang Feng said, "This is indeed a textile factory. In the future, it will be one of the largest textile factories in the Tang dynasty. Every day, there will be white cloth produced here, and thousands of clothes will be distributed from here. This is my purpose for setting up this textile factory." Gan Ziyuan didn't know whether Zhang Feng could do it or not. He also didn't know whether Zhang Feng's words, which they didn't even dare to dream of, would come true. However, they believed in Zhang Feng. They believed that Zhang Feng would definitely do it. However, what was the meaning of Zhang Feng's words? He didn't understand, so he could only nod. Zhang Feng didn't explain anything. He took a deep breath and said, "Old Gan, count the workers here. How many are there? Isn't it just winter clothes? If I can't even do this, my position as the dean will be over. Quickly count the number of people and send them to my courtyard." As he spoke, Zhang Feng left in a hurry. After Zhang Feng left, the craftsmen who had already noticed Zhang Feng quickly surrounded him and asked what the dean was doing here. Gan Ziyuan's mind was only filled with Zhang Feng's words. He took a deep breath and scolded, "What the hell are you all doing here? Can't you see that the dean is unhappy? The dean just told me that he's making clothes for you frozen ghosts. If you don't work hard, don't even think about it." Hearing this, all the craftsmen were in an uproar. The dean is making winter clothes for us? Is this true? I told you that this is a textile factory. There's a shortage of winter clothes everywhere in the world. But where are we? This is White Deer College. It definitely won't happen here. Amidst the uproar, the craftsmen on the mountain were boiling. Winter clothes, even the cheapest paper clothes, cost 100 copper coins. Even they couldn't bear to buy it, let alone so many people at home. Now, the dean actually said that he was going to give them. What was this? This was truly a joyous occasion. Chapter 1677. Lantian County had been the western gate of Chang, and since ancient times. It was also where the Guanyi Road and Shannon Road intersected. At this moment, a group of youths were waiting in boredom at the foot of an ancient tree that was at least 100 years old. On the side, the horses were leisurely gnawing on the small amount of sheep-beard grass on the ground. At this moment, all of a sudden, the horses seemed to be startled. They snorted in a panic, pricked up their ears, and spun around in circles. When the youths saw this, they were shocked and sat up straight. These youths were wearing the uniform of White Deer College. They were Qing Chumo and the others. They had originally wanted to send Li Qingxian off on the way to the college. However, after thinking about it, it was better to come here. After all, there were many eyes in the college. If their identities were exposed, then the losses would outweigh the gains. The only thing they were worried about now was Gao Can, the iron lump. It all depended on whether Li Qingxian had a way to deal with him. They're here. At this moment, Zhang Sun Chong stood on the branch of a tall tree and looked into the distance as he spoke. Instantly, the youths were energized. There were only 5,000 people on this expedition, including Li Qingxian's bodyguards and personal guards. He didn't even bring a single servant girl. This was Li Qingxian's decision. The official road was not far from the foot of the mountain where Qing Chumo and the others were. After they watched the carriages and the soldiers leave, Zhang Sunchong hurriedly rode his horse down the mountain. Amidst the chaos, Zhang Sunchong hurriedly brought Li Qingxian to the foot of the old tree. The troops at the foot of the mountain returned to normal after the commotion. Li Qingxian dismounted and the youths gave him a bear hug. Then, they looked at the strange dark green equipment on Li Qingxian's body and clicked their tongues in wonder. Qingxian, is this the new military uniform that Feng Zi came up with? Li Qingxian showed off a few strokes and said, "How is it?" The youth's eyes were red with envy. They peeled it off Li Qingxian's body, and each of them put it on. Only then did they reluctantly hand it over to Li Qingxian. At this moment, Du Go asked earnestly, "Qingxian, when did Gao Can find out about your identity?" Hearing this, Li Qingxian's expression changed slightly. He nodded and said, "Gao Ken is not stupid. In fact, he is smarter than anyone else. When he was in the military camp, he already knew our identities. I only found out today when I was chatting with him." Hearing this, everyone was a little stunned. In their eyes, Gao Ken was undoubtedly a blockhead, but they didn't expect him to be so meticulous. Li Qingxian shook his head and said, "I think Fengzi sent him to Chuozi City with me because he values his meticulous thinking. Do you think any of the people Fengzi accepted are stupid?" Now that he said that, only then did everyone come to a realization. Since he said so, then he must be clear about our relationship with Fengzi, right? Li Qingxian nodded and said, "He said today that as long as we don't have any bad intentions towards Fengzi, he will pretend not to know. Moreover, when you guys stole from Fengzi, did you think no one would know? That kid was already watching." At this moment, they couldn't help but look at each other. This guy was an existence that could even beat up the Yuchi brothers. If he wanted to beat someone up, all of the people here would probably not be a match for him. And this time, Feng Zi sent him to Chuozi. This also had a profound meaning. However, at this moment, they couldn't figure out what Zhang Feng was planning. Li Qingxian looked at the Yuchi brothers and Feng Yai and said, "That guy is waiting for you at the foot of the mountain. After all, you guys have a good relationship after fighting. Aren't you going to send him off? That guy has been waiting for you all the way." As he spoke, Li Qingxian was a little envious. However, he was more puzzled. Wasn't it just a beating? How could they have a good relationship after fighting? This made them very puzzled. Li Qingxian shook his head and said, "Since you are sending him off, did you bring wine?" "Heh, you asked the right person. How can we not have wine?" Ching Chimo chuckled and took out a few jars of wine from under the tree behind him. However, in his astonishment, Yuchi Baolin hurried over and snatched them away. Ching Chimo was a little dumbfounded as he took out the remaining 3 jars of wine and watched Yuchi Baolin slip away on her horse again. He could only speechlessly say, "Fine, I was just saying that we could drink to our heart's content today." This kid really dared to take 4 jars of wine in one go. "Huh, who told you to drink so much just now? Are you all right now?" Zhang Sun cursed speechlessly as he handed the wine to Li Qingxian. The few of them leaned against the tree and looked at the marching group not far away. They said with some envy, "I really envy you. You can go to Chuozi City. We don't know when Fengzi will let us out." AI. Isn't that right? My heavy cavalry, not to mention equipment, they don't even have a weapon now. AI. The few of them couldn't help but sigh. They didn't envy Li Qingxian and Gao Kansas. Li Qingxian shook his head and said, "You guys are thinking too simply. Fengzi's move is to stabilize Chuozi City in a short time. The reason he sent me over is to show His Majesty our strength. I was the one who solved the siege of Chang'an. That's why Fengzi decided to send me to the army for training. This is under the premise that he doesn't know our identities. He's paving the way for our future." Chapter 1678. The old elementary scholar was very comfortable. At this time, after class, he was leisurely warming his wine and reading with relish. He was also holding a cigarette in his hand and occasionally took a puff. The old elementary scholar hadn't experienced such a life for a long time. In his memory, he hadn't experienced such a feeling for at least 10 years. Only after attending White Deer College and thanks to Zhang Feng, did he have everything he had today. Although there were some shortcomings, it didn't affect the overall situation. Especially at this time, with such a magical book to study every day and teach with so many students every day. Such a life was a real paradise for the old elementary scholar. However, the only thing that worried him was Zhang Feng, the silly boy. He knew about what happened today and knew about the identity of Li Shimin and the others. But after seeing that they posed no threat to Zhang Feng, he didn't say anything. But from the beginning of the incident in Cheng, and until now, everything had changed silently. The old elementary scholar couldn't recognize it anymore. Especially after the phosphate fertilizer factory and the rubber factory were set up. All of this made the old elementary scholar a little fearful. This was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the old elementary scholar was really uneasy after seeing those murderous weapons in the workshop last time. In addition, there was a loud noise from Cheng and city last night. Although no one on the mountain heard it, after all, it was so far away, but someone talked about it. Every day, people came and went from the academy and the market at the foot of the mountain. In less than 2 hours, the news had spread on the mountain. The noise from the palace in the middle of the night was not simple. But through Old He's description, the old elementary scholar, Yu Shinan, and the others couldn't help but connect it with the explosion in the workshop a few days ago. With such a thing. In an instant, everyone was horrified. But fortunately, for some reason, this matter was suppressed by the palace for the time being. Only then did everyone feel relieved. After all, this thing was ignited in their own courtyard. He couldn't blame anyone else for this. After understanding this matter, the old elementary scholar could not help but think about the future. After all, manufacturing and armaments had always been walking on the edge of a knife since ancient times. The slightest mistake could lead to eternal damnation. And the most important thing was that the students of the academy were blindly admiring Zhang Feng. Therefore, what would Zhang Feng do in the future and how he would go? That was the most important thing. After all, at this time, not only was it not very peaceful outside, there were also countless people waiting and watching Zhang Feng. If Zhang Feng were to come up with this at this time, wouldn't it mean that Zhang Feng was completely on the side of the military ministry? This would be fatal to Zhang Feng and the future of the academy. Would the Ministry of Works let Zhang Feng off the hook for all the dirty tricks he had mastered, let alone anything else? That would be truly strange. However, at this moment, with a series of knocks on the door, the old elementary scholar came to his senses. He looked and saw that the wine on the small stove in front of him was already boiling. The old elementary scholar hurriedly took down the flagon on the small stove in front of him before slowly opening the door. As soon as he opened the door, he saw Yu Qigong and the others outside. The old elementary scholar was stunned. However, Wei Jing cupped his fists and said, "Brother Zihuai, I can smell the wine in your room from afar. Can I ask for a cup?" Seeing this, the old elementary scholar hurriedly invited them in and said apologetically, "This is just ordinary wine. I didn't expect you to come to my place. Please come in, quickly come in." As soon as they entered the door, Wei Zheng and the others were attracted by the old elementary scholar's flagon of wine. The old elementary scholar poured a cup of wine for each of them and asked, "Today, I wonder what you are here for." "Oh, this is what we are here for. We came here today for no other reason than to be attracted by the smell of your wine and to ask for a cup to warm our bodies." How could the old elementary scholar believe Zhang Sun Wuji's words? After all, these people wanted to drink wine, but he didn't. Besides, this kind of wine was popular now. At least in Cheng and city, almost everyone could drink it. Needless to say, these people were of high status and the wine was brewed by them at this time. How could they be short of wine? At this time, there must be something, and it must be something big. He couldn't help but ask, "Brother Sun, if you have something to say, there is no harm in saying it. We are not outsiders here. But let me say first, if it's about Fengzi, I can't make the decision." His words directly blocked their words. Zhang Sun Wuji and the others couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he said with a smile, Brother Zihuai, let's sit down and talk. After a few cups of wine for the old elementary scholar, Zhang Sun Wuji and the others complained about their poverty and their miserable situation. Qing Yao Jin even sneezed directly. When everyone felt that it was enough, Zhang Sun Wuji changed the topic and said, Brother Zihuai, it's going to be cold soon. At this time, we don't know where our clothes are. And the textile factory that Fengzi mentioned last time, we don't know when it will be able to produce it. So, we are worried. Hey, Brother Zihuai, it's still warm here. The old elementary scholar's eyelids couldn't help but twitch when he heard that. He hurriedly said, let me say first, I can't help you with this. If you want to drink wine, I have a little here. Drinking wine is easy, but other things are not necessary. Chapter 1679. Seeing the old scholar's simple and straightforward refusal. In an instant, the few of them could not remain calm. At this time, the only person who could change Zhang Feng's mind was the old scholar. Although they had thought of asking the old village chief, after much consideration, they still felt that the old scholar was more reliable. After all, they knew very well what kind of person the old village chief was. Besides the old scholar, there was actually a more suitable candidate, and that was Jingshu. But at this time, this kid was hanging out with these two all day long, and there was no chance to say anything even if they wanted to. Only then did the old scholar come, but now? At this time, there was nothing to do. Once the old scholar refused, it meant that there was almost no possibility of these great scholars agreeing. After all, these people were all of the same breath and branch as the old scholar. At this time, the wine that they were drinking was no longer as sweet as before, especially Yuqigong. At this time, when he saw the old scholar, his face changed instantly. He hurriedly begged, Brother Zihuai, please be magnanimous and help me. Last time, Fengzi said that he would leave the textile factory to me, and you all heard it. But today, I don't know what wrong medicine Fengzi took, he actually said. If he does this, even old man can't do anything about it. And this is a big matter that benefits the country and the people. Now the north is rapidly cooling, and as far as I know, most of the students in the academy are from the north. Think about it, if they know that their families are in such a state, will they still have the heart to stay in the academy? If this is done, it will be a big matter for the entire academy. Once the students are uneasy, the academy will be the one to suffer losses. Hearing this, the old scholar's eyebrows slightly furrowed. This matter was of great importance. If what Yuqigong and the others said was true, once the weather in the north dropped, although it would not cause widespread mourning, but it would cause the people to be uneasy. In the past, there had indeed been such a thing, but every year, the mulberry and hemp crops would not be cut off, and they could almost survive the winter. But once something happened in the winter, such as a heavy snowfall, there were bound to be people who froze to death because of it. This was rarely seen in previous years, but it was not unheard of. However, this year, there was a drought in Longyu Dao, followed by a locust plague. Almost all of Longyu Dao, Guanyi Dao, Shannon Dao, Jiannan Dao, and other places were affected by the locust plague. It could be said that this year's winter was even worse. Although the old scholar knew that these people were singing the same tune, he still fell for it. After all, the academy was founded by Zhang Feng. In order to build up the reputation of the academy, Zhang Feng had spent a lot of effort. But now, with the development of phosphate fertilizer and military equipment, the reputation of the academy was increasing day by day. However, if something were to happen at this time, then, it could be said that everything Zhang Feng had done before had gone down the drain. Thinking of this, the old scholar could not help but frown. Is this really the case? Seeing this, Yuqigong exchanged a look with Zhang Sun Wuji and hurriedly said, how can this be fake? Fengzi and we are all brothers, and we have even gone through life and death together. How can we harm him? The old scholar rolled his eyes and automatically filtered out Yuqigong's lies. This matter was stirred up by them. If not for them, how could there be such a situation? However, what Yuqigong said was not false. They had no choice in this matter. Now that things had developed to this point, even if they did not want to do it, they had no choice. In short, at this point, there would be many chain reactions. And this was only one of the reasons why the students of the academy were in a state of panic. If this was really the case, everyone in the world would think that what the academy had said before was all empty talk. That would be fatal. Although the old scholar did not know how much Zhang Feng had boasted before, now it seemed that the old scholar could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Once Fengzi stopped and did not care about this matter, everything that the academy had done before would instantly fall apart. The academy. The academy. Everything was because of the academy. Moreover, these things were all because of these people. If it weren't for their appearance, Zhang Feng would probably still be sloppy all day long. Then, at this time, perhaps he wouldn't be involved in these things that were enough to make people cut into pieces. Thinking of this, the old scholar could not help but say, "Gentlemen, we are all old acquaintances, and there are no outsiders here. Tell me, how serious is this matter this time?" Seeing that the old scholar had finally relented, Yuchi Gong said, "Well, almost all the memorials in the north are talking about supplies for the winter. And you know this year, because of the plague of locusts, almost all the mulberry, hemp, and textile industries have suffered heavy losses. And the Ministry of Military Affairs and the Ministry of Works, which had been in charge of this matter in the past, are now delaying as much as possible. There is even a temporary shortage of supplies. And you know about the emperor's situation. It wasn't strange for old Xiao to know their identities, so Yuchi Gong didn't try to hide it anymore. Instead, he revealed everything about this period of time. Anyway, this was how it was. Old Xiao knew how serious the problem was better than anyone else. Therefore, it wasn't just one person's problem, but everyone's problem. If Qiuzi was selfish, then the entire west gate of the Tang dynasty would be completely surrendered to the Turks. At that time, no one would have a good time. As expected. When the old elementary scholar heard this, his face instantly turned ugly. Stupid. He was completely muddle-headed. How could he forget such an important matter? Was he still the ruler of a country? He was not inferior to the ruler of a fallen country, Yang Guang, was he? That person, is this how he handles things? Everything is thrown to Fengzi. Has he ever thought about Fengzi's future? Have you ever thought about why Fengzi did not agree? This matter, let's not talk about others. Even you, the ruler of a country, can't handle it, and you throw it to Fengzi? Don't tell me this country belongs to him? Or does he have to do these things? Is there no one in the Tang dynasty who can do it? The old scholar said all that he wanted to say in one breath. Everything that Fengzi had done these days was still vivid in his mind. He had always wanted to stop him, but because of some things, they could not get too involved. But this matter, there was only a month before the new year. Who could do anything about the military supplies of hundreds of thousands of people? But Yuchi Gong and the others were right about one thing. He understood the principle that if the skin did not exist, the hair would not be attached. That was why the old scholar was so angry at this time. And Wei Zheng and the others did not look good. But although they did not look good, they still had to do it. They had thought of these things when they came to the old scholar, and they even thought of something more ruthless. At this time, seeing the old scholar's gloomy face, they relaxed. They were very straightforward. After all, they were all troublemakers in the imperial court. What kind of situation had they not seen? Wei Zheng sighed, but he leisurely lit a cigarette for old Xiaozai and said, "Brother Zihuai, this is a serious matter. Now that you have scolded and said, we still have to deal with it. You see, can we trouble you? What could old Xiaozai do?" At this time, other than glaring at them, what else could he do? He had a little way to deal with it. Would Wei Zheng let him scold him like this? He would have jumped up and punished him. After thinking, the old scholar took the cigarette from Wei Zheng's hand and said, "I'll go and ask, but it's hard to say whether it will work or not. You have to wait." Chapter 1680. At the foot of the mountain. The old village chief was very happy today. Due to Niu Weili's ruthless methods, the order in the market was maintained. Almost everyone was well behaved. Furthermore, those bailiffs no longer wore their bright and dazzling official uniforms. Instead, they obediently wore the ragged clothes that they usually only wore at home. Instead, their efficiency increased. This was all thanks to President Zhang Feng, who was on a stroll, who requested the broadcast. In an instant, the security on the mountain improved by several times. This was all because of Zhang Feng. At this time, at the fork in the road between the paper mill and the market, there was an additional pavilion that looked like a sentry post at the mountain gate. This pavilion had no other purpose except for the old village chief's daily surveillance and patrol. But at this time, inside the pavilion, it was somewhat unsightly. The pavilion was not big. It was only a little bigger than a toilet. In the middle of it was a pile of red-hot coals. Around it, the old village chief was drinking wine with Ching Chumo and the others. At the same time, he was leaning on a wild rabbit. The old village chief laughed heartily as he talked, almost wanting to become sworn brothers with them. A few jars of wine had already gone down his stomach. The old village chief's face was gradually turning red, and he was even slurring his words. Seeing this, Dugo and the others looked at each other and bumped Ching Chumo. Ching Chumo then pretended to light a cigarette for the old village chief and said in a daze, "Grandpa village chief, you're already so old. How could Feng Zi be so cruel to let you come here to suffer the cold and hunger?" The old village chief was dizzy at this time. How could he know what these kids were talking about? But at this time, the old village chief was unhappy when this matter was brought up. What are you talking about? Feng Zi's actions are the smartest of all. You have to know that at this time, all of this is insignificant. After all, old man has been the deacon for decades. Although he is not proficient in other things, he is proficient in judging people's faces in the market. If not for me being busy with the paper mill last time, how could this matter have happened? Hearing this, Ching Chumo and the others exchanged a smile. Dugo continued to ask, "Old village head, you're talking about level. That's why this Shao Mountain market has reached such a scale under your management. If it weren't for you, how could it become like this? But do you know that ever since the paper mill, the food factory, the phosphate fertilizer factory, the forging workshop, and the rubber factory were established, we suddenly felt that there was nothing to do. Recently, Feng Zi has also been mysterious. I don't know what he is doing. Do you know what Feng Zi is talking about?" This, the old village chief choked instantly. Ever since the last incident in the market square, although the market square was still in order, it did not restore the glory of the past. The old village chief had been in a state of guilt, so he did not care about anything and just stared at the market square. At this time, seeing the old village chief like this, Dugo toasted him again and asked with a smile, "Grandpa village head, you also know that the impact of the water wheel on the Tang dynasty is fatal. But we are also young people and also want to do something. At this time, it has been a few days and the weather is gradually getting colder, so, do you know what Feng Zi's plan is?" This, ahem. Well, the old village chief was stumped. It was a good thing that young people could think for Feng Zi, but at this time, how could he know? Feng Zi would not tell him these things. But now that these kids were asking him, how could he say no? He could only vaguely say, "Well, I'm not sure for now, but I can tell you one thing for sure, and that is, I will go up the mountain tomorrow morning. At that time, I can help you buy it and ask. You guys are really too much. If you have any questions, why don't you ask him personally?" Ching Chumo hurriedly said, "Aren't we just thinking of giving Feng Zi a surprise? Previously, we heard that Feng Zi wanted to build a textile factory, the kind that can produce hundreds of bolts of cloth a day, so we were thinking of asking you to help us ask if you can give it to us." The old village chief was naturally aware of this matter. At this time, when he heard them say this, the old village chief instantly understood. No wonder these brats came to drink with him today. They wanted to attract business. When he thought of the money from the paper mill being divided among them, the old village chief's heart was bleeding. If it were not for Feng Zi's desire to be a hands-off shopkeeper and there was really no one on the mountain that he could use, the old village chief would not have tolerated Zhang Feng's squandering. At this time, seeing that the few of them were thinking of this textile factory, instantly, the old village chief's expression changed and he asked, what did you say? You said that it can spin hundreds of bolts of cloth a day? Seeing this, the few of them nodded. They said, that's right. Fengzi has said it more than once. So you see. Without waiting for Qing Chumo and the rest to finish, the old village chief hurriedly opened the door. As he walked, he hurriedly muttered, wait, I'll go and ask this prodigal. Why didn't he discuss such a big matter with us? Chapter 1681. At this time, the temperature in Chang'an City was very pleasant. Although it was early winter, there was almost no coldness at this time. Only in the morning and at night could one feel a trace of coldness. The autumn planting had just ended. The popularity of the phosphate fertilizer matter had not dissipated yet. Although the authority of the phosphate fertilizer agent and the manufacturing authority were slowly transferred to the Ministry of Works. However, with so many people and so many demands, the Ministry of Works Agriculture Temple was almost overwhelmed. Therefore, some merchants saw the momentum and plunged into the market. Although there was no written rule that phosphate fertilizer could not be sold privately, at this time, it had just been popularized. The Ministry of Works itself had not figured out all the manpower and procedures. If they figured it out, who would know what twists and turns were involved in this? Therefore, under the instigation of Qing Chumo, Du Go, and the others, Lao Li and the other consortiums came into being. Although this Lao Li was not a despicable Lao Li, he was hired by Li Shimin to replace him. This could be considered as an explanation to everyone. There was nothing wrong with doing this. This was also the decision made by Li Shimin after thinking hard. After all, Chang'an City was only so big. If the news was leaked, or if one day Zhang Feng was out of his mind and went to their house for a visit, then, there would be big trouble. And this Lao Li, Lao Wei, and the others, although they were strictly selected from the palace, these people were almost all part of it. Almost everything was handled by Qing Chumo, Du Go, and the others. Therefore, at this time, they continued Zhang Feng's usual practice of looking for an agent. Of course, in this era, Zhang Feng really did not dare to use the professional term agent. He could only use some other terms. For example, the next agent. According to Zhang Feng, it was better to have fun together than alone. Therefore, Qing Chumo and the others also became hands-off managers. This time, the entire Chang'an City and the businessmen around Chang'an City saw a way to make money. Although the price of phosphate fertilizer was only 10 copper coins for 2 caddies, it was still a burden for the commoners. After all, no matter how little it was, every household had at least 3 to 5 mu of land. Even if it was just 1 mu of land, according to the Ministry of Works, using 5 caddies per mu of land was still an astronomical figure. But there was no other way. In order to fill their stomachs, everyone was throwing money into it. This allowed Zhang Feng and Li Shimin to earn a lot of money. At this moment, Chang'an was experiencing an unprecedented prosperity. There was no other way. He had already finished drawing, so he had to earn some money, right? Moreover, it was almost the end of the year. It was time to prepare some things for the new year. Therefore, the number of peddlers doing business in Chang'an City suddenly increased by dozens of times. At this time, walking on the streets of Chang'an City, Zhang Feng swayed and ate snacks while looking left and right. He really took a fancy to a few good things. Today, after saying goodbye to Wei Zheng and the others, Zhang Feng ran away with Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu's children. It was rare to have peace and quiet. Zhang Feng was not a god. Naturally, he also wanted to enjoy his free and unfettered life. Moreover, it was wishful thinking to make 100,000 sets of winter clothes in a month's time. Besides, there was no cotton, not to mention eiderdown or goose down. In this era, Zhang Feng was puzzled. Why was there not even cotton? However, when Zhang Feng was hit by the warm wind, he instantly understood. This might be because the temperature in this era was really as warm as spring. Although Zhang Feng had not been to Sanya in Chang'an at this time, in comparison, the temperature here was not inferior to Sanya in the future. Only then did he realize what had happened. However, at this time, Zhang Feng stopped at the stall of a woman in a pink dress that had been starched until it was white. It was mainly the things in the woman's stall that attracted the last bit. The stall was very small. It was almost a piece of linen on the ground. On the linen, there were stacks and bundles of delicate dried flowers neatly arranged. Zhang Feng squatted down and looked at the various types of dried flowers. He smiled and asked, "Madam, are these dried flowers for sale?" Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu were also attracted by the dried flowers in front of them. After all, it was not easy to preserve fresh flowers, and it was even more difficult to make them into dried flowers. As for this woman, although she was dressed very plainly, not a single hair was out of place. Especially her hair, it was even neatly combed. Seeing that Zhang Feng and the other two's actions were not ordinary, she smiled and bowed. She said, "Mister, may I ask why you're buying these flowers?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. He asked, "Don't you buy flowers because you like them? Then, this old woman will not sell them." The woman's words stunned Zhang Feng instantly. The voice here also attracted the attention of other people who were also doing business at the side. When they saw the situation, they said, "Young master, you look unfamiliar. You're probably not a local, right? This person has been selling flowers here for a few days, but she hasn't sold a single one. Do you know why?" Zhang Feng was also interested and asked, "Why?" "Because this woman has a rule. She said that only those who cherish flowers are qualified to buy them. Other than that, no one can buy from her." Oh my God. He is Zhang Feng. He is President Zhang. In an instant. Among the onlookers, someone suddenly recognized Zhang Feng. He exclaimed. As for the woman, although she was also a little surprised, she just looked at Zhang Feng a few more times. That was all. Zhang Feng gestured to the crowd and then asked, "May I ask, what is this flower? What is cherishing flowers? What is loving flowers?" Hiss. Hearing that. In an instant, all the onlookers could not help but gasp. A moment later, someone in the crowd shouted, "Young Master Zhang, you're awesome." Chapter 1682. In fact, Zhang Feng was also a little angry, but he understood a little bit of this person's idea. After all, for a person who was obsessed with a certain Tao, this thing was his lifeblood. For example, the thing that a scholar couldn't bear the most was others destroying some words, no matter whether these things were good or bad. Another example was a person who left a deep impression on Zhang Feng. Kong Yiji. This person also represented the hearts of countless people. And what he said just now was also a question to this person. The woman was also silent for a while. She squatted down and caressed the dried flowers on the ground. She said, "Young Master Zhang, I don't understand the principles you speak of, but I do know that these flowers are alive. If you really feel sorry for them, then just like how you feel sorry for the books in your academy, I feel the same way for these flowers." Jingshu's and Zhang Yuyao's eyes couldn't help but twinkle. They couldn't help but pull Zhang Feng's lapel behind his back. After giving his children a reassuring look, Zhang Feng said, "Madam, I understand what you said, but these things will only show their value in the hands of those who really need them. If you blindly appreciate their beauty, then why do you care about them? The meaning of life lies in the moment when it blooms. This is a matter of time. Just like a person, he is indeed alive, but a person's beauty doesn't lie in his moment, but in his journey of life. And this is the same for these flowers. Life should be like a summer flower. If its splendor can stun the world, they will naturally have expectations for its arrival in the coming year, and not leave it here to be turned into corpses. The corpses of flowers are publicly acknowledged and pitted." Buzz. In an instant, the whole Chang and city fell into a dead silence. Everyone was shocked by what Zhang Feng had just said. Even in the crowd, the students and literati who asked about Zhang Feng's arrival were even more shocked. Everyone was shocked by what Zhang Feng had said at this moment. What was this? This was what they were looking for. The first thing that came out of his mouth was a famous phrase from ancient times. It was simply shocking. As for the woman who met Zhang Feng's gaze, her entire body was trembling. After a while, she said, "Young Master Zhang, you're right. I was too obsessed. These flowers, I will deal with them properly. As she spoke, Zhang Feng saw the hint of understanding and disappointment in her eyes. Jingshu couldn't help but hold the woman's hand and say, "Madam, please don't mind what he said just now. It's not wrong to love flowers. If you really want to sell these flowers, why don't you sell them to me? I'm also someone who loves this path, but..." The woman shook her head bitterly and said, "Madam Zhang, you're too serious. Prince Zhang's words just now really made me feel ashamed. Please don't mention this matter again." When Zhang Yuyao saw this, she anxiously glared at Zhang Feng, but she could only stop him. Zhang Feng was also helpless under the glare. He could only stop the woman and say, "Madam, don't be anxious. My words just now were indeed a little harsh. It's my fault. However, I really do like these flowers. If Madam doesn't mind, why don't we go to the tea house over there for a drink and I'll explain it to you? I think Madam won't be able to find another person who cherishes flowers as much as you do." At this moment, the passers-by were already mesmerized by what they heard. When they saw Zhang Feng and the two women say this, they all tried to persuade them. Finally, the woman carried a basket of dried flowers and followed Zhang Feng into a tea house not far away. Originally, Zhang Yuyao wanted to ask Zhang Feng what he wanted to do. One moment, he was the one who talked about others, and the next moment, he was the one who invited others. She couldn't help but feel a little confused. However, she was stopped by Jingshu in the end. As soon as they entered the tea house, the owner hurriedly asked everyone to make room for Zhang Feng. There was no other way. Zhang Feng's reputation was too big. Moreover, at this time, Zhang Feng called people over. There must be something important to discuss. This was a living signboard. Who dared to offend Zhang Feng? They simply didn't want to live anymore. Other than leaving a few waiters to serve them, the rest of the people were all driven to the hall on the first floor. Zhang Feng and the others were invited to a private room on the second floor. Even those high-ranking officials, as well as those second-generation rich people, didn't dare to let out a fart. Who was Zhang Feng? He was the king god of slaughter. Zhang Feng was also a little depressed. However, he had no choice. He was too lazy to waste his breath on these people. Moreover, he also wanted to have some peace and quiet. After all, when he saw the dried flowers just now, he instantly thought of another way to make money. This thing was not simple. Originally, he wanted to take the two girls to Jiangnan. After parting with you, last time, the people who were sent by Zhang Feng to protect you, also sent some news. However, they heard that you's family and that so-called young master seemed to be crazily pursuing you, Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel angry. However, he didn't dare to say it. Old Li and the others, once he told them, they would definitely cause a huge commotion. He was the one who was in the wrong in this matter. He was the one who ate the other party. This matter was still covered up until now. If they caused a commotion, he was afraid that, however, after seeing the dried flowers, Zhang Feng had an idea. Therefore, he had an idea. As soon as he entered the door, Zhang Feng directly asked, "May I ask if Madam's family has declined?" Chapter 1683. Zhang Feng's words had undoubtedly hit the woman's sore spot. However, Zhang Feng's eyes were sharp. Although the woman was dressed very plainly, her dress was very exquisite and she loved flowers. This was not something an ordinary family would do. That was why Zhang Feng asked this question. However, at this moment, the woman's expression suddenly changed, but she forced herself to be calm and said, "Why are you asking this? Does the young master have other matters? If not, then don't tease me." Seeing this, Zhang Feng was even more certain of his guess. He said indifferently, "Madam, don't be anxious. The matter of the flowers is easy to deal with. It was inconvenient to check in that filthy place outside, so I hope Madam won't blame me. I saw that there were many peonies among Madam's flowers. These flowers are not something an ordinary family can have. That's why I asked. If I have offended you, I hope Madam won't take offense." Zhang Feng stared indifferently at the woman. After a moment, he added, "This one is willing to buy these flowers at a high price." As expected, after Zhang Feng said that he would buy them at a high price, a trace of excitement flashed through the woman's eyes. However, after a moment, it was hidden again. Seeing this, Zhang Feng continued, "Madam, this one only has about 1,000 strings of silver notes on me when I left the mountain this time. If madam thinks it's okay, you can sell it to this one. If it's not enough, I'll ask the shopkeeper for a pen and ink and write an IOU. When the time comes, you can use this IOU to go to any branch of White Deer College in Chang and to exchange for the money you need." What kind of person does Prince Zhang think I am? The madam couldn't help but feel a little angry at this moment. In an instant, an aura that only belonged to a superior suddenly bloomed from her body. However, who were Zhang Feng and the others? This moment was enough. Zhang Yuyao widened her eyes and stared curiously at the woman. Even Jingshu couldn't help but look at the woman and secretly size her up. The woman also felt a little regretful, but it was too late for regrets. She could only sigh helplessly and say, "Prince Zhang is indeed a genius. I admire your sharp eyes. What you said is correct. My family was once a noble family. However, due to the destruction of the Qin dynasty, we were also affected." Qin Chao. Zhang Feng's interest was immediately piqued. He hurriedly asked, "From what I've observed, madam's speech is also extraordinary. Why would you sell flowers on the street? Did something happen at home? If there's an emergency, I'll definitely help if I can. There's no need to trouble Prince Zhang. I just want to ask Prince Zhang, is there a person named Xia Zong in your academy?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng could not help but be stunned. There were so many people on the mountain, how could he remember them all? She could only ask, "I don't know about this for the time being. Madam, why don't you tell me this person's appearance, age, or some other title? I'll send someone up the mountain to look for him." When the woman heard this, she said, "He is very proud of himself. Since 10 years ago, pft." 3 sounds of water sprayed out, interrupting the woman's words. Zhang Feng could not help but ask in surprise, "Madam, are you saying that Mr. Zihuai is about 70 years old?" Hearing this, the woman's eyes changed and she said, "Yes, he is. I heard about him before, so I moved my family from Jiangnan. However, after coming to Chang'an, I couldn't find him anywhere. So I just asked by chance. I wonder if Prince Zhang can introduce me to him." At this moment. After that, he began to seriously observe the woman. Especially when compared with the old Xiaotsai. After all, these two people were too similar. He could not help but ask, "May I ask, what is the relationship between Madam and Mr. Zihuai? If you ask Xia Zong in Chang'an, no one will know. However, if you ask the old Xiaotsai, you'll probably find him long ago." The old Xiaotsai? The woman frowned slightly. But seeing the meaning in Zhang Feng's words, it seemed that there was news about him. She hurriedly said, "He used to be the most talented person in the Xia family of Qin County. After the fall of the Qin dynasty, his talent was recognized by Emperor Wen of Sui and he was appointed as the crown prince's servant. However, because of the fall of the Sui dynasty, he disappeared in order not to bring disaster to the family. However, in the end, our Xia clan was still affected. Even though we were not exterminated, we still fell apart. Xia Zong, the old elementary scholar that you spoke of, was from our bloodline. He is also my uncle." The woman poured out this piece of old history like pouring beans out of beans. Those who listened and those who spoke were incomparably sad. It was as if they were watching a drama of life. When she finished, Zhang Feng was silent. Although he was very curious about the old Xiaotsai's background, Zhang Feng could not help but feel pity for the old Xiaotsai when he heard this at this time. This stubborn old man. If Li Yuan and the emperor really wanted to deal with you, do you think you can be safe hiding in Chang'an City? After so many years, it was really, Zhang Feng sighed deeply and said, "The old Xiaotsai is my teacher. Leave it to me. I'll send someone to invite him down the mountain. If he doesn't come, I'll tie him up and bring him here." How about it? Chapter 1684. The Xia family. Although the woman did not say much, Zhang Feng could vaguely guess which family it was. It was the poem mentioned in Lu Yuxi's Wui Lane. Flowers bloom by the Vermilion Bird Bridge, the setting sun at the entrance of Wui Lane. In the old days, Wang Xiatang's swallow flew into the common people's house. Wasn't this a description of them? Who would have thought that Zhang Feng would be able to experience the sacrifice of a dynasty in this era, as well as the process of a clan going from glory to decline? After Zhang Feng sent the waiter to deliver the letter to the old scholar on the mountain, he returned to the private room. As soon as he entered, he asked, "I heard you say that the Xia family has been living in Jiangnan for a long time. Why did they suddenly move to Chang'an? But what kind of great change had happened? And they need." After the woman learned about the old scholar's whereabouts and that Zhang Feng was a disciple of the Xia sect, she felt slightly better than before. After all, a person's shadow was like the bark of a tree. Zhang Feng's reputation was well known, so when she heard Zhang Feng's question, the woman said, "Our success is because of the Xia family, and our failure is also because of the Xia family." When uncle left, the family was robbed by the Sui dynasty soldiers and the local people. 80% of the family property was lost and we could barely get by. But this year, because of the drought and the suppression of several merchants and aristocratic families in Jiangnan, the family was really, therefore, some time ago, the phosphate fertilizer business caused the entire family to fall apart in an instant. I advocated using all of our family's assets to purchase the Jiangnan phosphate fertilizer, but it was because of this that the patriarch expelled our bloodline from the Xia family. We had no choice but to come and try our luck after learning about Prince Zhang and uncle's names from the students who returned from Chang'an. But our family had just bought a property outside Chang'an city, and we were really short on food. Plus, our son was seriously ill, so we had no choice but to do everything we could to treat him. Seriously ill? Hearing this, Zhang Feng could not help but frown slightly. But before he could say anything, Zhang Yuyao couldn't help but sit beside the woman and say, "Madam, you may not know this, but the divine Dr. Sun Simiao, or Mr. Sun, is teaching in the academy right now. And our Prince Zhang is also quite..." Cough cough. Zhang Feng coughed and interrupted Zhang Yuyao. He did not dare to let her continue. This little girl was simply too much. Nothing had happened, and he had already said everything? How could this be? What if this person had some incurable disease? If he couldn't be cured, wouldn't he be smashing his own reputation? And what kind of miracle doctor was he? It was just a blind cat running into a dead mouse. Last time, if Niu Xiaohu's leg was really broken and split into two halves, he would be helpless. This time, he dared not promise others anything casually. It would really cost him his life. "Madam, may I know what illness the young master has?" The woman was also frightened by Zhang Yuyao's words. After all, as a former big clan, although they were driven out, they were still a big clan. She must have some information about some things. Naturally, she also knew Zhang Feng's ability. At this time, seeing this, she hurriedly explained the illness. Zhang Feng couldn't help but frown and said, "According to the illness you said, it should be lung disease, but has this lung disease been diagnosed before?" "I found out, but the doctors told my son to avoid meat and fish, and not to be exposed to the wind. However, it has been several years and there hasn't been any improvement. There is only one male in the family, and my son is known in the family as a talent who has the potential to surpass uncle. However, his fate is full of misfortune, and I have no other choice. Moreover, my son's monthly medical expenses are simply astronomical, so the woman said it with tears in her eyes. Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao were also in tears. Seeing this, Zhang Feng felt a headache. Fu*k, if Zhang Feng saw that quack doctor, he would definitely cut him into pieces. Fu*k, is there anyone who treats patients like you? Fu*k, you can't just care about money and ignore people's lives, right? Lung disease was mainly to clear the lungs and stop coughing. What was needed was fresh air. Moreover, this disease did not have any other requirements regarding diet. As long as one avoided spicy and stimulating food, there was no need to King abstain from eating meat. Wasn't this killing people? Zhang Feng felt a sense of cynicism and sighed, this illness isn't a big problem. I'll get Divine Dr. Sun to take a look at it later. Furthermore, I'll write something for you to change your living environment. Hearing this, the woman said with some doubts, Prince Zhang, what you said is true. Zhang Feng couldn't help but spread out his hands. The woman smiled apologetically, and then hurriedly pushed the dried flowers in her hand to Zhang Feng respectfully and said, to be honest, there are some at home. But as for the consultation fee, I will send the full amount later. Since Prince Zhang likes this flower, I have nothing else. Just take it as a gift for Prince Zhang to play with. Chapter 1685. A family that used to be glorious. Since when did they do this for a disease? Zhang Feng couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Looking at the flowers in front of him, Zhang Feng asked again, how many of these things do you have in your house? If you have, I'll take them all. How much should they cost? I won't give you a penny. Prince Zhang, are you humiliating me? Before Zhang Feng could finish, the woman flatly refused Zhang Feng and said, these things are valuable, but compared to my son's life, they are nothing. This is just an ordinary perfume sachet. If you want it, there are a lot of it in the south of the Yangtze River. You can buy half a kilogram of it for 1 penny. However, it is very rare in Chang'an. That's why I'm thinking about it. 1 penny for half a kilogram, sachets. Zhang Feng's eyes lit up instantly. The woman couldn't help but turn pale. Although the woman looked a little down, she couldn't hide her beauty. She was not as beautiful as Jingshu, Yuyao, or Yu. However, the charm of a mature woman had long been coveted by lechers in Jiangnan. Moreover, the woman was only in her 30s. At this moment, Zhang Feng's eyes made the woman feel a little disgusted. Since her husband passed away, she could often see this kind of greedy eyes from the servants, the clan members, and the passers-by, but now, the woman couldn't help but want to cry. In the past, she would have turned around and left. However, only Zhang Feng could save her son now. How could she dare to leave? Madam, you said that this kind of dried flower is everywhere in Jiangnan? The woman patiently nodded her head in response. When Zhang Feng heard this, he immediately burst out laughing. We're rich, we're rich. Ha ha ha, Jingshu, Yuyao, we're going to be rich. Hearing the question marks on the 3 women's heads, the woman came to her senses at this time. Zhang Feng was not that kind of lecher. He just thought of some way to make money, so his expression eased a little. Jingshu was a little speechless as she tugged at Zhang Feng's clothes and asked, you're fine. There are outsiders here. Seeing this, Zhang Feng came to his senses and hurriedly cupped his fists at the woman. Madam, I'm sorry. I lost my composure just now. It's just that I really thought of a way to make money that I've never thought of before, so I couldn't help myself. Sorry, I couldn't help it. The woman was a little suspicious. However, she couldn't say much. After all, this was other people's business. Moreover, she knew Zhang Feng's character very well. Let's put it this way. This kind of aristocratic family cared most about making acquaintances with the local merchant families and famous people. In Chang'an City, although the woman was from the declining Xia family, she had once enjoyed a great reputation. Of course, these things were necessary lessons. It was impossible for them not to inquire about Zhang Feng's reputation in Chang'an City and its surrounding areas. At this time, the atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. Zhang Feng also noticed it. He coughed and said, Madam, since you're a relative of my teacher, and you must know more about the things in Jiangnan than I do, how about this? I have a business here. Can you see if you can cooperate with me? Although the woman didn't understand what cooperation meant, she also understood that Zhang Feng did this for Xia Zong's sake. Otherwise, why would he care about a declining aristocrat? However, this was also the woman's expectation. How many years had it been? The Xia family tried everything to climb up the social ladder, but no one dared to provoke the remnants of the previous dynasty. Even if they used up all the remaining financial resources of the family, in the end, because of her husband's mistake, the Xia family suffered a great disaster. At this time, she didn't expect to meet Zhang Feng by chance because of buying flowers. Not only did he solve her son's illness, but he also solved the Xia family's urgent problem. At this time, because the Xia family had moved here, they only had enough money left to plant this autumn after purchasing the land title deed. If they didn't have a chance to survive, they would probably have a difficult new year. At this time, the woman couldn't help but ask, "Prince Zhang, if you have something to say, just say it. Although my family has indeed declined, I still have some connections in Jiangnan. And if Prince Zhang really wants this kind of dried flower, then I can guarantee that I can buy you as many as you want. And the price is the most reasonable and cost-effective. It's just that the road from Jiangnan to Chang'an is a little long." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said, "In that case, thank you very much, madam. I haven't asked for your surname. It's really my fault. May I ask for your surname?" "My surname is Xia, and my name is Chuyan." "So it's Madam Xia. How about this, Madam Xia, according to the price here, I'll charge you 3 copper coins per caddy. You can take the money just now, and if it's not enough, you can get more from the account. This will be the deposit for the first batch of goods. What do you think?" Zhang Feng's wealth made Xia Chuyan's eyelids twitch uncontrollably. But she still couldn't help but ask, "Prince Zhang, to be honest, this thing is really useless. I really don't know what Prince Zhang wants this for. And why waste this money?" Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously, but just as he was about to speak, there was a cough outside the private room. Zhang Feng immediately shut up and pointed to the door. "The person you're looking for is here." Chapter 1686. Xia Chuyan looked at the door in a daze. But before she could say anything, Zhang Feng had already opened the door. When he opened the door, he found that the 2 girls were looking at him strangely. He waved his hand and asked the 2 girls to leave the room quietly. After all, this was other people's family matter. He did not have the hobby of prying into other people's family matters. Once out of the door, Jingshu could not help but look at the dried flowers in the basket and asked, "Young master, you, Shu?" Zhang Feng made a shushing gesture and pointed downstairs. Jingshu immediately saw that downstairs was already crowded with people. They were all looking at him eagerly. Seeing him come out, many people were cheering. There were even some young people who were holding up their calligraphy books and shouting. Zhang Feng was too lazy to look at them. Even if he did, he would not understand. He simply pointed to the crowd downstairs and said to the 2 girls, "Do you see this? This is the current me. If I were to be as lonely as her one day, I reckon." Sigh. Zhang Feng sighed. He looked at the commotion downstairs and then looked at the sunlight shining in through the window. He could not help but say, "There are wild flowers by the Vermilion Bird Bridge, and the sun is setting at the entrance of Black Clothes Alley." In the old days, Wang Xiatang's swallow flew into the ordinary people's house. Sad, lamentable. Buzz. In an instant, there was a burst of excited roars downstairs. And in this roar, it was as if someone was crazily writing a brush and ink. There were even people fighting over the brush and ink. Seeing all this, Zhang Feng felt even more upset. Looking at a female servant who was trembling with excitement, Zhang Feng shook his head and said, "Are there any more private rooms?" "Yes, yes, yes." The female servant was so excited that she could not complete her sentence. She just nodded her head like a chicken eating rice. Under Zhang Feng's signal, she finally reacted and hurriedly led Zhang Feng into another private room, some distance away from the old scholar and the old scholar's private room. As soon as they entered the door, Jingshu lit a cigarette for Zhang Feng and then looked at the dried flowers in a daze. After a while, Zhang Feng said cautiously, "Don't feel bad about this little bit of money. I can only say that this money is really worth it." "What do you mean?" the 2 girls asked in confusion. Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously and said, "Don't ask about this. In short, you will understand everything when you go to Jiangnan with me. I want to make something that only women can use and give it to you." Jingshu couldn't help asking, "What is it?" "Perfume." This thing is good stuff. It extracts the fragrance from the flowers and then smears it on the body. The fragrance will stay on the body for a few hours. So, do you like this thing? Also, the perfume made from different flowers will have different scents, and the effects will naturally be different as well. In short, we are destined to be rich. Almost all the women in this era didn't wear any makeup. And in this era, the thing that Zhang Feng couldn't stand the most was not taking a bath. They rarely took a bath. This was the thing that drove Zhang Feng crazy the most. Zhang Feng wanted to open a sauna or something in Chang'an City. This was simply too much for him, especially every time he sat in the house with Chen Tiniu and his father. It was simply too much. But this perfume was different. This thing could not only block the smell on the body, but also make people feel relaxed and happy. Once this thing was made, it would definitely be popular in the entire Tang dynasty. And, the most important thing was, Zhang Feng was too embarrassed to say it. After all, the two girls were strong women. How could he say it out loud? Besides, Zhang Feng also wanted to go to Jiangnan to see you, and experience the Jiangnan of this era. The most important thing was that he wanted to hide 100,000 military uniforms a month. Damn it. Even if he was a god, it would be difficult, right? And Jingshu and Zhang Yuyao were not stupid. At this time, at Zhang Feng's words, the two girls instantly realized that all this was prepared for you, You said that all this was prepared for you, We still want to go to Jiangnan? Zhang Feng was instantly speechless and said vaguely, well, Jiangnan has the most of this thing and you heard it just now. So I was thinking that if I leave this matter to you, it will be twice the result with half the effort. Of course, we have to go too. After all, I haven't been to Jiangnan and I want to see the scenery there. This year, we will spend the new year in Jiangnan. I'm afraid you won't be able to escape. At this time, the old scholar's words almost made Zhang Feng choke to death. Zhang Feng hurriedly turned to look. At this time, the old scholar walked in slowly. Madame Xie greeted Zhang Feng at the door and hurried away with a red face. It seemed that something big had happened. When Zhang Feng heard this, he could not help but sigh and said, Old scholar, what are you talking about? Don't you want to go to Jiangnan to have a look? Chapter 1687. The old scholar shook his head and said, I'm not going. It's a sad place. Going there will only add to the sadness. Fengzi, I want to talk to you about something serious. When Jing Shu and Yu Yao heard this, they hurriedly got up and left quietly. Zhang Feng asked, You finished talking so quickly? The old scholar sighed and said, It's all in the past. What's there to talk about? When I have time, I'll go back and have a look. Seeing that the old scholar didn't want to talk about it, Zhang Feng quickly shut up. After all, this was his family's business. If he didn't want to talk about it, who could do anything about it? Old scholar, what did you say just now? Don't talk about the military equipment. 100,000 pieces a month. Even a god can't do that. The old scholar smiled bitterly and said, It's true. When I was on the mountain, Old Wei and the others came to me. Tai Niu and the others also went to the village chief. Do you think that if Lao Li and the others could think of a way, they would do that? And I'm worried that this is the emperor's idea. Whether we do it or not, it's your business. I have no right to interfere, but you should know that if you don't do anything about it, everything we've done will go down the drain. What's more, once the news of the lack of winter supplies gets out, it will shake the morale of the army. And if the enemy finds out, then, you know the consequences. Zhang Feng naturally knew the consequences if he didn't handle it well. But 100,000 pieces a month? Zhang Feng wanted to go crazy just thinking about it. There was nothing. He didn't even know where Mian was. What could he do? With what? With his mouth? Therefore, Zhang Feng decisively slipped away. But he didn't expect these people to be so persistent. They directly went to find the old scholar. This was going to be troublesome. Zhang Feng coughed and said, "Old scholar, although I know about this, what should I do? What should I do? Although I know how to make this textile machine produce 500 bolts of cloth in a day, this thing is not the same as weaving. If you were to do something else, I would be able to pay you 100,000 yuan a month. But at this time, I can't do anything about this. I can't possibly make some paper clothes to fool others, right?" Speaking of which, the old scholar didn't say anything. He just undid his belt and waved his hand. "Come and see what I'm passing on." Zhang Feng had been wondering if the old elementary scholar had gone senile, but now he understood. He hurriedly went forward to take a look. He saw the old elementary scholar pull at the inner shirt and then pull at the seam, revealing something underneath. Zhang Feng took a look. Good lord, this guy is really wearing paper clothes. This kind of paper was a bit like Xian paper, but the material was different. It was very soft, as if it was made from the bark of a tree and then pasted together with the technique of papermaking. It also had a kind of elasticity to the touch, but the traces of sweat and grease had to be removed. Zhang Feng was a little surprised and asked, "Old scholar, your clothes are really made of paper. Can this thing be worn?" The old scholar rolled his eyes. "Then what do you think people of this era wear? What do you wear in winter?" Zhang Feng immediately shut his mouth. This question really made him speechless. When he first crossed over, he really didn't pay attention to what he was wearing. But at that time, it was early spring and he didn't feel that cold. Although the clothes he was wearing were a little thin, he was wearing at least 4 or 5 pieces of clothing, so he didn't feel that cold. He didn't know what people of this era wore. At this time, when he saw what the old scholar was wearing, Zhang Feng suddenly couldn't help but ask, could it be that they really wear clothes? The old scholar was a little speechless. He seriously doubted how Zhang Feng had survived the winter before. He could only blame it on Zhang Feng being young, so he didn't wear these things in winter. He just patiently explained to Zhang Feng, ordinary people basically have to endure the winter, or use linen or the bark of this kind of tree to make clothes. This kind of clothes is also jokingly called paper clothes. Only those high-ranking officials or businessmen can afford to wear clothes made of palm bark. These are all in Chang'an, and the officials are here. If you go to the north, you need sheepskin or cowhide to keep out the cold. But even so, every winter in the north, there are frequent reports of people freezing to death. But this year's situation is more special. You also know that after the locust plague, basically no grass grows. Those mulberry trees and hemp trees are almost extinct. So this year's winter is really a bit difficult. Otherwise, they wouldn't have come to you so painstakingly for help. The old scholar took a deep breath and stared deeply at Zhang Feng. Actually, I also want to know if you can solve this matter. Although I used to be very tired of you doing these military things, but this time, I think it is very necessary for you to solve this matter. After all, when the nest is overturned, there are no eggs intact. This is also something you said before, so I still think you should seriously consider this matter. Zhang Feng was silent. If it was someone else who said this, he would definitely refuse without thinking. But it was the old scholar who said this, so he had to carefully consider it. After thinking for a while, Zhang Feng took a deep breath and said with a bitter smile, "If it was someone else, I would definitely ignore them. But since it is you who came to plead, it means that this matter is really serious to the point where I have to deal with it. Okay, then I will give it a try." Chapter 1688. Seeing that Zhang Feng had agreed, the old scholar heaved a deep sigh of relief. Just as he had said, he really did not want Zhang Feng to be involved in this matter. However, this matter had really reached the point where it had to be solved. Zhang Feng could not help but say, "Although I have agreed to this matter, there is one thing that I have to make clear to you." The old scholar smiled and said, "Don't tell me about this matter. If you want to say something, you should say it to your brothers. After all, they have also told me that no matter what request you make, as long as it can solve this matter, they will fulfill it. Don't you think that I should confirm it with you first? I still have something to do, so I will leave first. As for the rest, you can worry about it." After saying that, the old scholar decisively left the room. Zhang Feng was stunned. This was the first time he had seen the old scholar so unconcerned about this matter. Because he still remembered that the old scholar had really taught him a lesson when he was experimenting with gunpowder last time. I gave him a good lecture, and at that time, he kept telling me not to do it. But now? Previously, the old scholar had told him not to get involved in this matter. But now? However, Zhang Feng could also understand this matter. If it was the first step that could be solved, the old scholar would not have been so anxious to persuade him. Zhang Feng was sure that if he still did not agree to today's matter, there would be countless people who would be persuaded to persuade him. Zhang Feng did not dare to try being brainwashed again. Furthermore, it was the horrifying scene of the 4 great Confucian scholars surrounding and brainwashing him. At this time, Zhang Feng fell into his own thoughts again. These things were for him to do. The first thing that came to Zhang Feng's mind was cotton. As soon as he thought of cotton, Zhang Feng could not sit still. He hurriedly followed the crowd downstairs. Although the downstairs was already blocked, at this time, seeing that Zhang Feng was coming down, no one dared to stop him. They all opened up a path for Zhang Feng to escape from the scene. As soon as he got out of the door, Zhang Feng hurriedly hired a carriage and rushed towards his courtyard. Moments later, Zhang Feng appeared in the mansion. As soon as he entered, he saw Du Zidong and the others strolling around in the courtyard with nothing to do. As soon as they saw Zhang Feng return, everyone was so busy that they rushed to greet Zhang Feng. Seeing this, Zhang Feng had an idea and said, "Old Du, hurry up and gather everyone. I have something to ask everyone." Everyone couldn't help but feel a little confused when they heard this. This was especially so when she saw Zhang Feng rushing back anxiously and gathering everyone as soon as he returned. She thought that something big had happened. Zhang Feng hurriedly asked, "I have something to ask you today. What kind of clothes do you wear during winter?" Everyone was stunned at first. Then, everyone's expression became a little strange. Seeing this, Zhang Feng was speechless. He had to beckon Du Zidong to his side and asked, "Old Du, let me ask you. This is not a joke. Tell me, how do you spend the winter?" Du Zidong was completely confused. "Master, why do you ask this?" But seeing Zhang Feng's serious face, Du Zidong did not dare to be careless. She hurriedly said, "In winter, we basically wear paper clothes." Paper clothes again. These were the words he heard the most today. After taking a deep breath, Zhang Feng said, "Hurry up and get me a piece of paper clothing. Let me take a look." Du Zidong was a little confused. However, he didn't dare to say anything. He still followed Zhang Feng's instructions and hurriedly went to get a clean paper shirt and handed it to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng held the clothes and looked at it carefully for a moment. The clothes were basically made of crushed bark of the red holly tree and mixed with wood and grass ash. Although it was quite soft, Zhang Feng could feel that it was definitely not sturdy. Zhang Feng didn't know if it could keep warm, but once it rained or snowed, it would definitely not be able to be worn. This was definitely not possible. If this item was in the past where there was less rain and snow, then it would still be okay. If it was in the north, then this item would basically have to be changed after wearing it once or after 2 or 3 days. At this moment, Zhang Feng suddenly thought of something. Why did the army lack this item every year? This was King paper clothes. How could it not cost? That would be like seeing a ghost. But at this time, if he used something else to replace it, the best thing was cotton. But in this era, at this time, where was he going to find cotton? Zhang Feng held the clothes in the courtyard and thought hard. But at this time, he was suddenly attracted by the clusters of small white flowers in the garden. He couldn't help but walk over and take a closer look. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Who King planted cotton in the flower bed?"